5 Republican candidates face off on the debate stage tonight in an attempt to earn the nomination for the Republican Party's presidential candidacy in 2024. Yeah, it's a live stream. I can't do everything perfect, but I try my best. And you guys are here. And thank you so much for watching Speechless. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Speechless, this special election live stream for the 3rd Republican presidential primary debate. I'm Kevin Phares, your host of not only Speechless on YouTube, but also Speechless of Cities 92.9, the news and talk of Bloomington Normal and beyond. And it's beyond because I bring you this content off air onto YouTube and such. And so make sure that to not miss a minute of it, you guys like this video, subscribe to the channel, comment what you think, share it with your friends, especially tonight. It's a beautiful night for a live stream. It's a beautiful night for a debate. Share it with your friends so they can all be involved as well, whether that's on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatever. You just messenger pigeon them the link. That's perfectly fine with me. And when you tell them to subscribe, don't forget that they should also ring the notification bell. Set it to all because ScrewTube likes to make sure that this content isn't seen. For the commentary tonight on this debate night live stream, I will be bringing on my good friend. You guys know him. You love him. Well, you might. I don't know. Even I question it sometimes. My good friend, Josh Bender. How's it going, buddy?
Hey, buddy. How you doing?
Yep. So that's Josh Bender.
He's really doing it?
Oh, yeah. Well, see, here's the thing. So I'm going to be honest with everybody right off the bat. And I'm always honest with you guys. I would never lie to you. I love all of you, but except for you, Josh. But if the election were held today, I would absolutely vote for DeSantis. However, I will look at every candidate on the stage and off with the most candor that I possibly can. And when it comes to objectivity, we know that doesn't really exist in any type of journalism. I wouldn't consider myself a journalist anyways, but in any kind of media, there's no such thing as objectivity. But I'm going to give people credit when it's due, and I'm going to tear them down as much as humanly possible because I'm the Simon Cowell of this thing. Josh will be more like what's that one guy's name? The one that's nice to everybody.
Randy Jackson.
Randy Jackson.
Yeah.
Josh is more of the Randy Jackson.
I'll take that.
And so Josh is a dissimp. I love him. Yeah, but he'll be a little bit more of a dissimp now. He's more of a history teacher. But
yeah, I mean, I am wearing my DeSantis shirt. I got my DeSantis hats over here. I got 2 of them. I got my book, my signed book over here too. I keep it all. So I'm a fan. There's no denying that.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. And so we got a lot to talk about. Obviously, the debate starts in 30 minutes, and so just under 30 minutes. And so I've got it pulled up. I'm keeping it monitored and everything. If you guys do not remember last time that I hosted one of these debate night live streams, there was a lot of technical difficulties. So the first one was I got kicked off of Facebook. And not only did I get kicked off of Facebook, I got kicked off of Facebook for like 3 days, which sucked. But if I get kicked off of Facebook right now or at some point tonight and you are watching on Facebook, one, I'll be really sad and really mad because I wasn't able to access even my own personal Facebook or anything. Like it banned me from, I know, exactly. So it banned me from everything. But I still want to try to bring this stuff to you guys. And so I'm going to try some new things out in terms of what I do with the screen and such to try and adding more and more commentary throughout the debate. So that we can attempt to not get that copyright violation that we did last time, even though I am using the publicly accessible Rumble live stream that the RNC does that everybody else could go watch too if you didn't want my commentary.
And as we said before, I mean, these should be public to everyone. I mean, if we truly want
be C-SPAN.
Right. If we truly want everyone to know who the best candidate is, you should make these public to everyone. There should be none of these BS copyright claims.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
But the point of what I'm saying is that make sure you go check out the YouTube. If you are watching on Facebook right now, make sure you go check out the YouTube Speechless with Kev. You'll be able to see it on there. I did not get any copyright violations on YouTube last time. But even if I do this time, it will likely stay up on Rumble. I have my Rumble as well. Speechless with Kev Phares. Same thing like across the board. You'll always see my bright and smiling face that Josh always reminds me was made for radio. So yeah. You can always go check out those. Facebook will be the first to go if it does. I'm going to hope it doesn't. Also, last time there were technical difficulties on the side of Rumble. That is where the free live stream is. If you want to have the live stream uninterrupted, no commentary or anything, well, first off, boo you, because that means you'd have to leave mine. But NBC, I believe, is the one streaming it tonight. And so if you want to go watch it on NBC's channel, without any possibility of any interruptions, because even Rumble, like I said last time, had its own issues on the technological side where there was freezing, there was all these problems there. So those are my announcements. Those are like the little housekeeping things I want to start off with. And I'll remind you guys if there are issues of any kind, then I will remind you guys of that. I do want to say hi to some of the people in the chat. Don't forget, you guys can always comment and let me know what you're thinking. I see Andrea there. Thank you, Andrea, for being a part of it. She also did say hello to Josh. She doesn't deserve that, but you still
yeah,
did it.
you know.
And I did get kicked off of Facebook for 3 days. Now we're starting to get into some predictions, bold predictions. Ryan McKenzie here. Thank you for tuning in. Ryan Mack of the Ryan Mack Show. Bold prediction: Christie out eats the others off stage.
You know, I think he could do it.
It is not a hot dog eating competition, but gosh darn it, if Christie were in a hot dog eating competition, I would put my money on him tonight.
Yeah.
Not the same thing. And I know we have some other things we want to try to cover quickly before the debate actually starts, but I want to outline the debate for you guys tonight. If you did not know, to qualify for this debate, candidates needed to secure a polling minimum of 4%, so a little bit higher than previously. I believe it was 1% last time. Candidates also needed to garner contributions from a minimum of 70,000 individuals before the 8 p.m. deadline on Monday. The fourth debate, which has already been announced, will be held in Tuscaloosa, Alabama on December 6th, which means that I'll also be here on December 6th to bring it to you guys. And the RNC has raised the stakes, asking the candidates to have amassed 80,000 donors by that point and a minimum of 6% in the polls, meaning that we're going to start dwindling down not only the race itself, but also the people that are on the debate stage. Participants of tonight's debate, however, are former New Jersey governor and the biggest one on the stage, not necessarily in polling or anything other than size, Christie, Florida Governor Ron Desantis, who is the currently in second place in most major polls, former United Nations Ambassador Nikki Haley, who has been rising in the polls recently, businessman Vivek Ramaswamy, who has surprisingly taken a dip recently, and Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina, who frankly I almost forgot was even in the race.
Yeah.
The GOP frontrunner in the polls, former President Donald Trump, is not participating, just as he hasn't in the last several. He will, however, be holding a rally nearby in Hialeah, Florida. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it. I know I probably have some Florida viewers right now. How do you shout out Marcel? If you are, you can correct me in the comments. But that's where Trump will be holding a rally, is Hialeah, Florida, which is predominantly Cuban American area, which was very positive growth for the Republican Party, period, both in DeSantis voters for his governorship and Trump in 2020. So it'll be very interesting. Noticeably absent, besides Trump, Mike Pence, who recently suspended his campaign, and the lovable idiot Doug Burgum. I say idiot in jest. He seems like he's probably a pretty smart.
He seems like a great guy, yeah.
But he's just like, nobody really knew. I always said, who was that guy, jokingly during the other ones, because nobody really knew who he was. But let's talk real quick, Josh, about what to expect. What do you think we should be expecting in this one? Who do you think will do well? Who to watch? Things like that.
Well, I mean, I think we're absolutely going to see a fight between DeSantis and Haley here. I mean, those two are fighting for the position in Iowa, and those two are going to go at it. They kind of started it last time. I've been looking at both their Twitters, and they've been throwing shade for the last 2 days, really hammering each other about their record, especially.
Mm-hmm.
So those two are going to be fighting. I can almost guarantee it. Christie's going to do the same thing Christie does, and he's going to go up there and say some pre-rehearsed cheesy lines about Trump and then leave. Tim Scott, I think, will maybe say a couple things and then back away. Ramaswamy, I don't know if he's going to go for the I hate everyone, I'm better than everyone, or the we're all friends here, because he did both of them. So they both seem to not help him very much. So I don't know which one he's going to go with.
Absolutely. I have a few things that I'm expecting. First off, I want to just be clear too. I believe this presidential race right now is a two-man race. It's between former President Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis. I always hear people that'll be like, well, it's just a one-man race because of the polls. I even posted on Twitter today. There was polls that came out back in 2016 that showed Hillary had a 98% chance of winning that election, 99%, whatever. I take polls with a grain of sand out of the Sahara Desert. That's just my personal philosophy. I didn't trust them in 2016. I didn't trust them in 2020. Didn't trust them in any other point. I take polls with a grain of sand. Now, they are still a grain of sand, and I'll recognize them. But the polls I trust are the primaries and the nomination at the convention in March. Those are the polls that I trust, because that's what's definitive. I don't really know at this point. Mike Pence only suspended his campaign. While it's a long shot, maybe he comes back in and wins it all. That's the first thing I want to say. What do I expect tonight, however? I believe that this is the first debate since the Israel-Palestine conflict really heated up. I believe because of that, Nikki Haley will be highly one to watch, and it's a time where she could she'll likely capitalize. I'm going to predict that now. I think Nikki Haley will come across very, very well in this debate because of her United Nations experience, as well as presiding over. I don't know if she was over the entirety of the Abraham Accords, but at least part of those peace talks she was a part of. She has also been one. There was one time that it was before. There's a lot of things, especially during 2020, that made me jump off Nikki Haley's train of any kind. But when she was in the United Nations, she did have a speech that she gave to pretty much everybody when they were all trying to say, all of the United Nations were trying to say, America needs to do more. America needs to do more. And she basically called them all out and saying, we do everything for you guys. And anytime we need anything in return, you don't. And so I think that with that kind of experience, she'll definitely capitalize on the conversation regarding Israel and Palestine. It also makes me believe that topics of foreign policy will dominate a lot of this debate, or at least a good section of it. I believe that because of Israel-Palestine's conflict, it'll tie in more about Ukraine, and potentially, if they want to be edgy, they'll talk. The moderators will talk about Taiwan and China as well.
Yeah, well, and I think Israel Hamas is going to be good too, because I think I know Governor DeSantis announced that he is bringing as a special guest a couple of the people who were in Israel that he rescued with his planes to the debate. So he's going to have people who were there that he directly helped rescue from Israel, from Hamas, and so he's definitely going to try to capitalize on that as well. He's also going to definitely run on the fact of, I've been in the Middle East and I know what that area is like, and I know how these Islamic nations and terrorists can be. So we need to be, he's definitely going to run on that.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. So that's going to be, while I do believe that DeSantis has a record to bring on with it, I still, like I said, I think that Haley will actually capitalize a lot on it. And I want to be clear here too, because there's a comment that Andrea has posted twice now, and I will address it. Stop cheering on these people. You get sick from drinking poison. The cure is not drinking less poison or different poison. The cure is not drinking poison and the Fed. Okay, I know you're more of an anarchist, Andrea, which is perfectly fine. I will accept any and all ideologies on the channel of Speechless. But one thing I want to be clear here about is that I'm not necessarily cheering on any of these people, period. I'll cheer when I hear something good, and I will laugh and condemn when I hear something bad, and anything in between I will also cover. I honestly think that these debates provide for a fascinating outlook, even if you are convinced, even if you're somebody who is vehemently convinced that Trump will be the nominee and there's no thing in the world that could possibly change that. At a minimum, these debates serve for us to see what people that are at least perceived to be leaders in the Republican Party, what they see for the future of America and what they see the Republican Party should stand for. Because one of the things that, and this is another thing I know we wanted to talk about, Josh, and we'll talk a bit more about the debate, but we wanted to talk a little bit about the elections that happened yesterday. Off-year elections, voter turnout is usually lesser in off-year elections, but Republicans didn't fare very well.
No.
And that's an understatement. Republicans did not fare very well. Out of the Associated Press, Democrats had plenty of good news to celebrate in Tuesday's off-year elections and more evidence that they could win races centered on the national debate over abortion. Abortion rights supporters won on their Ohio ballot measure. The Democratic governor of Beat Red, Kentucky, held onto his office by campaigning on reproductive rights and painting his opponent as an extremist. A Democrat won an open seat in the Pennsylvania Supreme Court after campaigning on his pledge to uphold abortion rights. And Democrats took full control over the Virginia State House. Glenn Youngkin cannot pass abortion restrictions because of this. So my firm belief right now is that a huge issue with the Republican Party isn't that they're too pro-life or anything like that. I believe that we can't get our messaging under control. Or Democrats come out and they will tell you, we want abortion up till birth. Some will even go a little bit further, but they're at least consistent saying abortion needs to be accessible, period. Limited to no restrictions, but abortion needs to be accessible. Republicans stand out here, and you have some of them, and this just pisses me off. You can't tell I'm a little angry today. Republicans will be out here, and they'll just say shit Like, and I could say that on YouTube, but I'm not. I had to remind myself. But
Yes.
Republicans will come out here and they'll be like, well, it's a states' rights issue. It's a states' rights issue. And then you'll have others that'll be like 6 weeks. That's when it is. You'll have others that come out and say no abortion, no exceptions. You'll have others that come out and say, well, 15 weeks sounds like a good thing. That seems what most people can get. Get our messaging together, everybody. Get our messaging together. Come on.
But do you know what, Kev? Do you know
What?
what, Kev? I think it's good that our messaging isn't together because it shows that we're not a fucking uniparty. We're not a one-minded animal. We have numerous sides.
Okay, I get that, Josh. But when you're trying to cultivate a following from the average person, being all over the place on the one issue that is like dominating the national conversation,
right?
You need to have a semi-united front. But when you have some Republicans that are out there and I get the whole like, oh, well, we're going to be free speech and everything. You can have your own personal opinion. But in terms of the party, our leaders of the party need to be on a united front of these kinds of issues, of the dominant issues.
I mean, I think that's the problem, though, because we have the front runner blaming pro-lifers for losing elections.
And again, I think everybody's part of the problem.
I think that's an issue right there. That when President Trump comes out and says, we lost because we're too pro-life. What are you talking about? I mean, that's ridiculous. I mean,
once again, it's not necessarily because we're too pro-life. It's because we cannot decide what we are.
Sure.
Like if we were able to narrow it down, here's the thing too, Josh, is that again, I have a level of respect, obviously, for we could be the party of different ideas and like everything, but we need to have a general, if the argument between the party is, are we restricting it 6 weeks or 15 weeks? We could do that. We could sell that message.
Right.
Like then we have a message to sell. But when you have some in the Republican Party that come out and say, well, we're not going to touch it at the federal level because the court said that it's a states' rights issue. Well, not only is that idiotic, because when you're running for when you're running for president, you're running for Congress or Senate, your job isn't to be like, well, this is what the court said. No, the purpose of the court is to interpret the laws that are put in place by the legislatures. So if you're running for a part of the legislature or somebody who is supposed to be actively working with the legislature to pass legislation, then you need to have a message that says, here is the legislation we are going to pass, and we will let the court decide whether or not. The Democrats are pretty united that they want to enshrine a right to abortion.
Right.
Through federal legislation. So we cannot have somebody in the Republican Party who is running for a federal office saying, hey, we're just gonna let the states figure it out. Because while they let the states figure it out, the Democrats are drafting and passing legislation that enshrines a certain level of right to abortion. And so I'm done with these people that are like, well, it's just wishy-washy bullshit. That's what I'm saying. I'm done with wishy-washy bullshit.
I mean, you know what? I'll disagree that that's wishy-washy because I do ultimately believe it's a states' rights issue, as in the Constitution has no mention of it. So I think it's a states' rights issue. I'm a constitutionalist at the end of the day. If a federal bill is to come up and they can get agreement on it, fantastic. We'll see what the Supreme Court says. But I do believe states' rights is totally fine. I get what you're saying, though, about the back and forth about the no unified message. And I think that is a huge problem that we're going to face overall. With everything, though, we're facing that issue. The abortion one's, I think, the biggest one, without a doubt, the biggest one, because it is the one that's dominating overall. I mean, I think looking at last night, Ohio is a pretty red state, and they just enshrined abortion. It was like 56% of the vote, 56.6 or something like that. That's a pretty big number. I mean, that's overall a pretty big number. So what I'm curious is where are we losing the messaging? Where is messaging being lost?
The messaging is being lost in the fact that when we're even asked about abortion, you have some candidates that'll shy away and just, again, be like, it's a states' rights issue, while others will be, we need to say, hey, if you're a candidate for anything, unless your office, because you'll have like people that are running for like mayor or or city council, and they'll be asked a question about abortion. Your answer, if you're running for one of those, should be like, my office does not deal with that.
Right.
That's what your answer. But if you're running for an office where you potentially could deal with legislation that's directly related to abortion, you're running as a Republican, we need to have a clear stance. And we do in the Republican National Convention, like party stance handbook. I forgot exactly what it's called, but there is every 4 years, there's a book that comes out. It's usually, I mean, it's just a PDF. You could Google search it, that basically says, here are our stances on like all of the major issues that are in the world right now. And that's whatever it says in there. That's what our candidates should be saying. And if they need to clarify it with like, okay, well, I'm running for the state house in Illinois, and so like, while I firmly believe and I will push this ideology, I got to be honest, my entire or the chances of me getting anything passed are slim to none. So like, if you need to put an asterisk with it in your answer, sure, but your answer should follow the handbook. Mm-hmm. That's what we need to do, because we can't have people coming out being like, well, I'm not going to answer that question because the Supreme Court said it's a states' rights issue. Crap like that. No, we're not doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's one issue overall that we're seeing. I mean,
also, by the way, Josh, so, I mean, and I see a comment here. It's not necessarily, so DG said that the Constitution guarantees the right to life. I believe it's actually technically, if we talk about the Declaration of Independence,
yes,
life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. So I believe there is an argument to be made that there is an enshrined right to life within our founding documents.
Sure.
Again, it's not a constitutional. I mean, you could make an argument through the Constitution about it, but it would probably be another one where it's like when they make the 14th Amendment argument for the right to privacy.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, that's like super arguable, and I don't understand, but at least in the Declaration of Independence, yes, there's an enshrined right to life.
Well, and you know, and to kind of go a little off topic, because we kind of started talking about this with the elections from last night.
Yeah, so the elections from last night, Democrats won for the most part. We had some small Mississippi governor is Republican still, or whatever. The Republicans had some wins, but it was like 2022, except for worse. Like people are expecting Republican blowouts, and we didn't win.
Exactly. And I think I said I think Kentucky is going to be the number one state to look at. I said that all night. Because Bashar won against a very unpopular governor by like 0.5% of the vote. He barely squeaked by. He won last night by about 5%. And this is in deep red Kentucky.
Yeah.
Daniel Cameron was a Trump-backed candidate who campaigned and ran ads of I'm Trump backed, I'm Trump backed, I'm Trump backed, Trump endorsed me, I'm Trump endorsed, I'm Trump, and he lost in deep red Kentucky, where Trump won in 2020 by 26 points.
Yeah,
that to me, I look at that and I go, so clearly, I mean, and this is obviously my analysis. Trump is losing his gusto. He is. I read so many articles saying, well, it's because Trump wasn't on the ballot. He essentially was there. This guy ran as I am a Trump-backed candidate. I'm a Trump guy. I'm a Trump. He ran on that, and he lost in Kentucky. I look at that, and I go, clearly, Trump is losing his edge. He's losing his support. I think independents, if they did go out and vote last night, and I know off year it's shorter. I get
that's why when it comes to a lot of it, I'm like, off year elections, it's like, okay, it's kind of like the polling to me. Maybe a little bit bigger of a grain of sand, but it's still a grain of sand to me in the fact of, because when you have a presidential election year, you're going to get everybody and their brother is, no, not everybody. You're going to get like 50 to 60% turnout, which like in my mind, in terms of election statistics, that's everybody and their brother in my head.
Right. But I mean, and again, I get it's an off year, but I still think it's something to look at and something to say, how in bright red, I mean, beat red, 26 points, Trump victory, Kentucky, does a Democrat governor who's not very popular in the time where Joe Biden's president, how does he win by 5 points, almost 6 points? Yeah. How is that possible? And I think Bashar did a smart thing, because he did not attach himself to Biden. He tried to differentiate himself and say, I am a Kentucky Democrat. I'm here for Kentucky. That's it. That is how he really did it, is he separated himself from Biden, where I think Cameron attached himself to Trump, and that was his downfall almost.
Okay. Read that question. Answer that.
See, how do you explain the down ballot split, though? Kentucky AG is overwhelmingly won. Bashar barely won re-election. If you're voting an R ticket, how do you pick a D governor on down ballot? I think independence. I mean, I think that's what it comes down to, independence. Maybe they felt that, yeah, AG is pretty good. The, everything else pretty good. But I don't like that this guy is running as a Trump. He's a Trump guy. I don't like that. So I'm going to maybe vote a D. I'm going to go vote Bashar. He's, he hasn't done terrible. He doesn't remind me of Biden, so I'm going to go with him.
So you're convinced it's Trump. It's not like, again, like I said earlier, like a lot of people analyze it as abortion ruled a lot of the conversation. That's what
I mean. I think
that Kentucky governor race. That was one thing I noted, is that his opponent was framed as an extremist, especially on the issue of abortion.
I think that's part of it, but I do largely think if this guy's running as I'm a Trump guy, and Trump is starting to lose his popularity a bit, I think it's going to hurt. There's a lot of these independents, especially, are going to go, all right, I either have Bashar, who, again, he's not terrible. I haven't really heard much about him, but he's not Biden. He's not trying to connect himself to Biden. And this guy who's connecting himself to Trump, well, I know I don't like either of them. So I'm going to go for the guy that seems to be kind of making his own name. And that's all a lot of articles read today was Bashar just put himself on the map as potentially a running mate, if not a future presidential candidate.
Interesting. I had honestly never heard of him before this race. It was not somebody. Kentucky has never been a state that I've followed super, super closely. I was interested to hear that he was not only an incumbent, but also that he was a Democrat, just simply from the fact of everybody that I know from Kentucky is like blue collar Trump Republican.
Well, right.
And everyone that I know from Kentucky.
Exactly.
And so it's not statistics or anything. It's just,
no, I get what you mean. I get what you mean. Right. And I think that's telling that they just he won again by 5 points. That's not a small victory.
Yeah. No, absolutely. We still have a few more minutes before the debate starts. I'm going to work on sharing the screen. One thing I wanted to talk to you about, Josh, is so obviously last week, especially because you're Josh Bender to simp. And so Josh Bender to simp.
I like that.
But because you are so attached to the DeSantis campaign, again, I've announced that that's mainly my candidate as of now. I really do like Ron Desantis, and I can get into that with anybody who would like to. If you want to text or call in at 309-451-9299, not right now, probably after the debate or maybe during a break, 309-451-9299. I'll be fielding the phone the whole time. But I wanted to talk real quick. So the governor of Iowa endorsed Ron DeSantis over the weekends, Kim Reynolds. Trump actually came out and said that that Kim Reynolds had lied to him, saying that she had once said to him that she was going to remain neutral. And so he was really pissed off about that. But the other thing that he did, or that had happened too, was like just right before that almost, which kind of, because of the Reynolds endorsement, it kind of got buried, was that 5 Republicans from the Florida state legislature had flipped their endorsements from DeSantis to Trump.
Yeah.
What do both of those events together, and considering all of that, what does that say?
Well, I think the Reynolds thing, you're right. At one point, she did say she was going to stay neutral. That's been the precedent, is that the Iowa or the governors stay neutral. And she talked about this. She said, you're right, I was planning on it, but I saw what I thought was a problem. I think Trump it cannot win. I think he's not a viable option. And so I'm kind of breaking precedent to endorse DeSantis because I know him well and I know he can win. She spoke on that. She even said, she goes, the last time being President Trump spoke, he was begging me for an endorsement. And I said no. And now but she's like, but I'm not going to just stand by and let him take over and potentially not lose and lose. I mean, lose. I want the viable option. So she went and endorsed DeSantis, is now putting everything she has behind him, which I think is awesome. With the Florida state legislators thing, he still has, DeSantis still has the majority of Florida state legislators. Yeah, 5 flipped. I think there's 5 that are seeing an opportunity potentially and I think it's why a lot of these people have endorsed Trump, because if you go against Trump and on the off chance he does win, your career is ruined. But if you side with him and he loses and then DeSantis wins, DeSantis is going to say no harm, no foul. I understand it was a primary. I'm not upset with you, because DeSantis actually, is a decent person and not in for himself, unlike Trump.
Yep, totally. All right, well, let's get going here. It seems to be starting. I'm going to unmute my site, make sure that we can all hear it here.
It's 2024 presidential nominee.
Audio's good?
Yeah,
The
sounds good.
candidates ready to make their case on why they're prepared to be commander-in-chief amid two wars on the world stage, how they plan to tackle stubborn inflation, and how they can unite a deeply divided electorate. Who is best to take on President Biden? And can any of them first beat former President Trump, who's far ahead in the polls? The candidates are here. Florida Governor Ron Desantis, former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley, entrepreneur Vivek Ramaswamy, former New Jersey Governor Christie, and South Carolina Senator Tim Scott.
From NBC News, the Republican presidential debate. Live from the Adrian Arst Center in Miami, Florida.
And good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Republican presidential debate. I'm Lester Holt, anchor of NBC Nightly News.
Good evening. I'm Kristen Welker, moderator of NBC's Meet the Press.
Hello, I'm Hugh Hewitt, host of Salem Radio's The Hugh Hewitt Show.
We are now just 68 days from the Iowa caucuses when Republican primary voters will begin to determine their party's nominee for president. Tonight, we'll question 5 candidates seeking that nomination on how they're best prepared to be commander-in-chief. And of course, how best to bring down prices impacting Americans across the country. We have 2 hours for a serious debate on the issues that matter most to Republican voters. Candidates will have 1 minute and 30 seconds for answers and the opportunity for a closing statement. Follow-ups will be at the discretion of all of us at the table, the moderators. Invoking a candidate's name or policy does not necessarily mean the mentioned candidate is entitled to a response. I want to caution all the candidates not to interrupt or speak over your fellow debaters. If you talk over each other, the voters can't hear you. And given the critical issues we're facing specifically on the world stage, we want everyone to hear every word you have to say. Continued interruptions may result in loss of additional questions. And to our audience, please hold your applause
Nikki
so
Haley
that the candidates
wearing
can be
all
heard.
white.
With
It
that
was a
said,
strategic decision
let's have
because
a good
everyone
debate.
around her was not wearing.
All right, our
everyone
first
was
question, the opening question, is one for
Yeah, she
all of
stands
you.
out.
Donald Trump is the first ex-president in more than 100 years to remain popular among Republican primary voters as his legal challenges mount. Governor DeSantis, let me begin with you on this one. Speak to Republican voters who are supporting Donald Trump. Why should you and not him be the Republican nominee to face Joe Biden a year from now?
This country is in trouble, and the elites that have put us here, they don't care about you. They don't care that you're having to grapple with higher grocery prices or have higher gas prices. They don't care that your family's less secure because of the open border that's allowed drugs and even terrorists to come into this country. Well, I care. I am not going to sit idly by and let this country continue its downward spiral. We need leadership, and we need it now. I'll take the hits. I'll take the arrows. I'll take the slings. Because ultimately, it's not about me. It's about you. I will fight for you. I will make sure to lead this country's revival, and I will win for you and your family. Actions speak louder than words. We don't have time for excuses, and it's not something that we're going to be able to have all these distractions. As a veteran, I will get the job done. Now, if you look where we are now, it's a lot different than we were in 2016. And Donald Trump's a lot different guy than he was in 2016. He owes it to you to be on this stage and explain why he should get another chance. He should explain why he didn't have Mexico pay for the border wall. He should explain why he racked up so much debt. He should explain why he didn't drain the swamp. And he said Republicans were going to get tired of winning. Well, we saw last night, I'm sick of Republicans losing. In Florida, I showed how it's done. 1 year ago here, we won a historic victory, including a massive landslide right here in Miami-Dade County. That's how we have to do it. So I promise you this, as the nominee next November, I'll get the job done. And as president, I will deliver.
Your time is
up.
Let me turn to Ambassador Haley.
Honestly, I couldn't cut her answer. I could have probably predicted most of that, but he was going to say that. Not a bad answer.
Well, I
But
think you look at the fact that we're almost $34 trillion in debt. 60% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck.
50% of American families can't afford diapers. 1 in 6 American families can't pay their utility bills. You have parents who are worried about what's being said or taught to their child in the classroom. There's no transparency. We have anti-Semitism all over our college campuses, and students feel unsafe. You've got an open border where terrorists can come through, and we've got wars happening all over us, and there are dangers around us. You know, everybody wants to talk about President Trump. Well, I can talk about President Trump. I can tell you that I think he was the right president at the right time. I don't think he's the right president now. I think that he put us $8 trillion in debt, and our kids are never going to forgive us for that. I think the fact that he used to be right on Ukraine and foreign issues, now he's getting weak in the knees and trying to be friendly again. I think that we've got to go back to the fact that we can't live in the past. We can't live in other headlines. We've got to start focusing on what's going to make America strong and proud. And that's what I'm focused on doing. Let's make sure we pay down our debt. I think we need an accountant in the White House. Let's make sure that we have transparency in the classroom. As a mom, I know what that means. Let's make sure we secure our borders so that our families are safe. Let's get crime down, because our families want to know that they can be safe no matter where they go. And as the wife of a combat veteran, I will tell you, a military needs to know we have our back, and we need to make sure that America is strong.
Ambassador, thank you very much. And, let me just caution the audience. Let's not go down this road. We've asked you to please, restrain yourself.
Oh, shut up, Lester.
Helpful, so we can hear the candidates, because
Exactly.
these are important issues.
Shut
up.
Shut up. Mr. Ramaswamy, let me turn to you.
He looks like
please
shit.
make your case. Why would you?
He looks bad.
Why should you be the nominee and not the former president?
He's old.
I think there's something deeper going on in the Republican Party here, and I am upset about what happened last night. We've become a party of losers at the end of the day. It was a cancer to the Republican establishment. Let's speak the truth. I mean, since Ronna McDaniel took over as chairwoman of the RNC in 2017, we have lost 2018, 2020. 2022, no red wave that never came. We got trounced last night in 2023. And I think that we have to have accountability in our party. For that matter, Ron, if you want to come on stage tonight, you want to look the GOP voters in the eye and tell them you resign, I will yield my time to you. And frankly, look, the people there cheering for losing in the Republican Party. Think about who's moderating this debate. This should be Tucker Carlson, Joe Rogan, and Elon Musk. We got 10 times the viewership, asking questions that GOP primary voters actually care about, bringing more people into our party.
He is.
Do you think the Democrats, we've got Christie Welker.
I mean, I get it.
Do you think the Democrats would actually hire Greg Gutfeld to host a Democratic debate? They wouldn't do it. And so the fact of the matter is, I mean, Christian, I'm going to use this time because it's actually about you in the media and the corrupt media establishment. Ask you, the Trump-Russia collusion hoax that you pushed on this network for years, was that real or was that Hillary Clinton made up disinformation? Answer the question. Go.
Mr. Ross.
Sorry. He's going for anger today.
Country back.
Look at that forced smile.
We need accountability because this media rigged the 2016 election. They rigged the 2020 election with the Hunter Biden laptop story, and they're going to rig this election.
Your time is up.
Accountability.
Let me turn to Governor Christie. Why you?
100% agree with that. I'm firmly behind that answer.
He's going for anger on the
Let's not do this. Let's let the candidates speak. Governor Christie, why you and not former President Trump?
Well, Lester, look.
Look at that silver fox.
You said it at the beginning of the debate.
Look at that silver fox right there.
We are dealing with extraordinarily important issues facing this country right now. We have our greatest ally in the Middle East under fire from a terrorist group that has committed to wiping them and every Jewish person in this world off the map. We have Ukraine with Vladimir Putin, a communist KGB dictator who wants to put the old band back together. He's starting in Ukraine and he's going to move to the Baltics and Poland after that. We have inflation in this country that is choking,
like a boomer who
choking every American family that wants to try to rise up and give their children a better life.
I agree with this. Alex.
And tonight, we need to decide which president is going to be the one to tackle the big issues, who's going to make this country look once again, not just inward, but look outward at the world and say America is the country, the indispensable nation that makes this a safer world. And in a safer world, American innovation, American hard work has always been the thing that has driven our country to greater things. I'm going to be the president who will do those big things. We're not going to be small. And I'll say this about Donald Trump.
Nothing about you small.
Anybody who's going to be spending the next year and a half of their life focusing on keeping themselves out of jail and courtrooms cannot lead this party or this country.
All right,
and it
Governor,
needs to be said plainly.
Governor, thank you. Let me turn to Senator Scott. Senator Scott, you've said former President Trump can't win. Make your case to Republican voters.
Well, certainly. What I would say without any question is that the
forgetting
truth of
he's
my
there.
life
I know, right?
destroys the lies of the radical left. We need a president and a candidate who will actually help our base solidify and attract independent voters into our party. The Great Opportunity Party is now winning back African-American voters and Hispanic voters because we are working on a foundation based on faith. Our nation is facing some deep challenges. It is the loss of faith in this nation that is a part of the erosion that we're seeing every single day. It's restoring faith, restoring our Christian values that will help this nation once again become the city on the hill. When Ronald Reagan talked about the city on the hill, he was coming from Matthew 5. When President Lincoln talked about a house divided, that was Mark. Our founding documents.
He must not be winning very well
the
with
importance of a faith foundation. You don't have to be a Christian for America to work for you, but America does not work without a faith-filled Judeo-Christian foundation. I would be the president that helps us restore faith in God, faith in each other, and faith in our future. Without that focus, none of the issues, the policies matter. We have to get back to being a nation that is, in fact, the city on the hill that believes in each other enough for us to fight
Scott,
for that future.
Senator Scott, thank you. We're going to turn now to the challenges facing.
I mean, like, I don't necessarily disagree with him
the next
personally, but it just
commander-in-chief.
came off
You'll all
as
be
super
fielding
preachy.
questions
preachy,
first
yeah.
from me and the Republican Jewish coalition, and then from Kristen and Hugh. So as we continue forward, the Israel-Hamas war is barely a month old. Tonight, Israeli troops are fighting inside Gaza City with over 200 hostages who remain captive there, and civilian casualties mount inside Gaza. As President of the United States, what would you be urging Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to do at this moment? Governor DeSantis.
I would be telling Bibi, finish the job once and for all with these butchers, Hamas. They're terrorists. They're massacring innocent people. They would wipe every Jew off the globe if they could. He cannot live with that threat right by his country. That Hamas should release every hostage and they should unconditionally surrender. I'm sick of hearing the media. I'm sick of hearing other people blame Israel just for defending itself. We will stand with Israel in word and in deed, in public and in private. And I can tell you, as governor, I actually did something about it. Biden's neglect has been atrocious. We had Floridians that were over there after the attack. He left them stranded. They couldn't get flights out. So I scrambled resources in Florida. I sent planes over to Israel, and I brought back over 700 people to safety. There could have been more hostages had we not acted. And I'll tell you this, I met the first plane load when they came to Florida, and one of the mothers pointed to a 6-year-old daughter, and she said, my daughter had been saying the last 2 nights, Mommy, I don't want to hear any more bombs, no more rockets. I just want to get back to Florida. So there's a difference between words and deeds. We acted and we saved lives.
Thank you. Ambassador Haley, what would you do? What would you be urging Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to do? Would you consider humanitarian pause, for example?
The first thing I said to him when it happened was I said, finish them. Finish them. And the reason is I worked on this every day when I was at the United Nations. And we have to remember that they have to, 1, eliminate Hamas, 2, support Israel with whatever they need, whenever they need it, and 3, make sure we bring our hostages home. We need to be very clear-eyed to know there would be no Hamas without Iran. There would be no Hezbollah without Iran. There would not be the Houthis without Iran. And there wouldn't be the Iranian militias in Syria and Iraq that are trying to hit our military men and women if it hadn't been for Iran. And who is funding Iran right now? China is buying oil from Iran. Russia is getting drones and missiles from Iran. And there is an unholy alliance. We need to be clear-eyed. The last thing we need to do is to tell Israel what to do. The only thing we should be doing is supporting them and eliminating Hamas. It is not that Israel needs America. America needs Israel. They are the tip of the spear when
Why?
it comes to this Islamic terrorism, and we need to make sure that we have their backs in that process.
All right.
Why
Thank
does
you.
America
I support Israel.
Mr.
I support
Ramaswamy,
Israel.
any
We don't
daylight
need
between
that.
you and the
That sounds
candidates we
weird,
just
but-
heard in this issue on what you would tell the Prime Minister?
Not in terms of what I would tell the prime minister, no. In fact, I would go one step further. The founding vision of Israel was based on the idea that they don't want to depend on anybody else's sympathy or direction in defending themselves. So what I would tell Bibi is that Israel has the right and the responsibility to defend itself. I would tell him to smoke those terrorists on his southern border. And then I'll tell him as president of the United States, I'll be smoking the terrorists on our southern border. That's his responsibility. This is our responsibility.
Angry
That's
Ramaswamy.
how we move forward. But I want to be careful to avoid making the mistakes from the neocon establishment of the past. Corrupt politicians in both parties spent trillions, killed millions, made billions for themselves in places like Iraq and Afghanistan, fighting wars that sent thousands of our sons and daughters, people my age, to die in wars that did not advance anyone's interests, adding $7 trillion to our national debt. And Joe Biden sold off our foreign policy. Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, got a $5 million bribe from Ukraine. That's why we're sending $200 billion back to that same country. The fact of the matter is the Republican Party is not that much better. You have the likes of Nikki Haley, who stepped down from her time at the UN. Bankrupt or in debt was her family. Then she becomes a military contractor. She joins the board of Boeing and otherwise, and is now a multimillionaire. So I think that that's wrong when Republicans do it and Democrats do it. That's the choice we face.
He always
do you want a leader from a different generation who's going to put this country first?
Why do they hate each
or
other?
do you want Dick Cheney in 3-inch heels?
All right,
Because
Mr.
they're fighting back two of them on stage.
Ramaswamy, thank you.
Dick Cheney
Senator
and
Scott,
three-inch
yes, Senator, same question to you about you're the president, you're on the phone in the Oval
Miller.
Office with the Prime Minister,
Oh
you
my
tell him
God.
what?
That was
Vivek wouldn't
Number
be
one,
that
I would
guy.
tell
Oh my God.
Prime Minister Netanyahu, not only do you have the responsibility and the right to wipe Hamas off of the map, we will support you. We will be there with you. We'll stand shoulder to shoulder. There will be no daylight. But I would change the station a little bit, though, and head back home to America. I would say to President Biden, diplomacy only is a weak strategy. Appeasement leads to war. From President Obama to President Biden, Obama sent millions to Iran. Frankly, President Biden has sent billions to Iran. That is why I've said that there's blood dripping from the hands of President Obama and President Biden. I would tell President Biden with great clarity, if you want to stop the 40+ attacks on military personnel in the Middle East, you have to strike in Iran. If you want to make a difference, you cannot just continue to have strikes in Syria on warehouses. You actually have to cut off the head of the snake, and the head of the snake is Iran and not simply their proxies. In order for us to have a powerful response from America, we have to be in a position of strength. As President of the United States, my foreign policy is simple. You cannot negotiate with evil. You have to destroy it.
All right, Senator Scott, thank you. Governor Christie, I want to get you to weigh in here.
Look, Lester, these problems are so big and serious that the first thing I would say to Prime Minister Netanyahu is pretty simple. America is here, no matter what it is you need at any time to preserve the state of Israel. Remember that Hamas's main goal is to get rid of Israel, is to get Israel absolutely off the map. Now, there are three things I think I would say to him when he asked for advice. The first I would say is that it is absolutely your obligation to protect the territorial integrity of Israel. Secondly, to make sure you protect the security and the safety of your people. Every time something happens to compromise either one of those things, it creates greater unrest in the entire region. Second, you must go in and make sure that Hamas can never do this again. The fact is that Israel and their intelligence community failed. They failed here, and they failed the people of the state of Israel. And so we need to work closely and better together to make sure, one, that they're degraded, and two, that we know everything that's going on inside the Gaza Strip when it's going on, so that something like this can't happen to kill 1,400 individuals again. And the third thing is to keep your eye on the ball. Make sure that we continue to isolate Iran
I gotta be
work
honest,
with
I
the
stopped
reasonable
listening to him,
nations
like,
in the Middle East,
soon
the
after
other
we
Arab
started talking.
nations
I was like,
who want to partner with you, and make sure that we continue to isolate Iran so that their only friends in the world are the part of the evil foursome: China, Russia, Iran, and North
Governor
Korea.
Christie, thank you very much.
I
And we're
did
going to
just hear
continue in
him
this
say
vein right now
the
with a
evil
question from
foursome.
Matthew Brooks, the CEO of the Republican
Oh my God, I was sorry, I didn't mean to pause. I was working on the volume here.
partner of the Republican National Committee in this debate. Here it is.
Given attacks by Iranian-backed proxy groups on U.S. military bases in Syria and Iraq, attacks that have wounded approximately 24 of our U.S. servicemen, do you support the use of military force by the United States against Iran?
Governor Haley, would you please answer that?
Yes, I'd first like to say they're 5-inch heels, and I don't wear them unless you can run in them.
My mom would like
The
that answer.
second
My mom would
thing
like
that
that
I will
answer.
say is I wear heels. They're not for a fashion statement. They're for ammunition. What we need to be doing for Iraq and Syria is, first of all, the idea that our men and women could be targeted and that we've allowed almost 100 hits to happen under Biden's watch is unthinkable. We need to understand this is Iran giving the green light, telling them what to do, and we shouldn't be doing the tit for tat like what Joe Biden has done. We need to go and take out their infrastructure that they are using to make those strikes with so they can never do it again. Iran responds to strength. You punch them one and you punch them hard and they will back off. But what we don't need is Biden falling all over himself to get back in the Iran deal, him giving $6 billion to get 5 hostages home, him telling Netanyahu now that he needs a pause or a ceasefire. We don't need him going and sitting there tiptoeing around Iran because he thinks they're going to do something. You don't respond to an enemy and a terrorist with fear. You respond with strength. When you do that, that's when the world pays attention, and that's when Iran stops.
Thank you. Governor DeSantis, if I can continue with you. Just today, the U.S. launched another one of its limited airstrikes against targets in Syria, this time Iranian-linked facility. How far would you go militarily to hold Iran accountable?
Well, first, Matt, thanks for your question, and I appreciate what you've done over the last month. I know it's been very difficult for the community, and appreciate you guys rallying together in difficult times. I actually served in Iraq back in the day, and we had al-Qaeda in Iraq. You had Shia militias that were funded by Iran that were killing hundreds and hundreds of U.S. troops. And as commander-in-chief, I am not going to put our troops in harm's way unless you're willing to defend them with everything you have. Biden has them out there. They're sitting ducks. He's doing glancing blows. That's just inviting more attacks from the Iranians. I would say you harm a hair on the head of an American service member, and you are going to have hell to pay. We are not just going to sit there and let our service members be sitting ducks, and that's true whether it's Iran or whether it's any country on the world. We have to be strong, and we have to defend the people who defend us.
All right, thank you, Governor. And now our second and final question from Matthew Brooks of the Republican Jewish Coalition. Please watch.
Jewish students across the country are threatened and under attack. What do you say to Jewish students on college campuses who feel unsafe given the dramatic rise in anti-Semitism? And what do you say to university presidents and college presidents who have not met the moral clarity moment to forcefully condemn Hamas terrorism?
Mr. Ramaswamy, would you like to take that one?
Absolutely. I think the scourge of anti-Semitism across this country, including at places like my alma maters and places like Brooklyn Bridge in New York, it's sad to see, but here's what history teaches us. Anti-Semitism is a symptom of a deeper cancer in a country and a society that is lost, and we are lost. Several years ago, when I wrote my first book, Woke Inc., I was talking about they were chanting death to America. Death to white people, death to Christians. Nobody was waking up back then. Now it's even bad. Now they're saying death to Israel and worse. So it is wrong, but we have to get to the root cause here. Now, I think it's really important that we do this through leadership, not censorship. Leadership means fill that void with purpose and meaning. Dilute this wokeism and anti-Semitism to irrelevance. These kids, they have no idea what the heck they're even talking about when they're siding with Hamas over Israel. They are fools. But I also want to caution here, if we go the direction of Ron Desantis or Nikki Haley, with whom I respectfully disagree on this issue, pro-censorship, telling student groups to disband, Mark my words. Soon they will say if you question a vaccine and its side effects, you're a bioterrorist. Soon they will say that if you show up at a school board meeting, you're a domestic terrorist. Soon if they say that J6 prisoners should be released, you're an insurrectionist terrorist. So that's where this road ends. We don't quash this with censorship because that creates a worse underbelly. We quell it through leadership by calling it out. These university administrators have lost their way, and we need leadership at the top in the United States of America that restores our founding values and that has no place for this kind of anti-Semitic hate. That's where I stand while respecting our Constitution.
Your time is out. Senator Scott, let me get you to weigh in on what you just heard.
So let me just say to every single university president in America, federal funding is a privilege, not a right. Number one. Number two.
I like that.
To every student who've come to our country on a visa to a college campus, your visa is a privilege, not a right.
Agreed.
Number three.
Agreed.
Any campus that allows for anti-Semitism and hate, to allow students to encourage terrorism, mass murder, and genocide, you should lose your federal funding today, period.
Agreed.
To all the students on visas who are encouraging Jewish genocide, I would deport you from those campuses. We have to stand strong with our Jewish Americans. At the end of the day, we should not have our Jewish students in a library being told to hide. On our streets in New York, a Jewish citizen has the right to walk on the streets of America with no fear. They have the right to go to college campuses, go to class, and not fear. We will restore that. I started working on anti-Semitism on college campuses in 2017 because even then there was a rise of anti-Semitism on college campuses. We must force the people off those campuses and
Senator
frankly,
Scott, thank you. Let me
out of our country.
Let me turn to the Governor DeSantis here. What do you think about what he just said?
I was the first presidential candidate to say, if you are here on a student visa as a foreign national, you're making common cause with Hamas, I'm canceling your visa and I'm sending you home. No questions asked.
100%.
Second, I have friends here in Florida who their kids do not feel safe even going to university campus at all outside of the state of Florida. You have Jewish students fleeing for their lives at Cooper Union. Joe Biden should have the Department of Justice on these college campuses and holding the universities accountable for civil rights violations. When you should not have money going to these places. I already acted in Florida. We had a group, Students for Justice of Palestine. They said they are common cause with Hamas. They said, we're not just in solidarity, this is what we are. We deactivated them. We're not going to use state tax dollars to fund jihad. No way. And what is Biden doing? Not only is he not helping the Jewish students who are being persecuted, he is launching an initiative to combat so-called Islamophobia. No, it's the anti-Semitism that's spiraling out of control. Right. That is what we have to confront. And as president, I can tell you this, we are not going to stand for this on college campuses any longer.
All right, Governor, thank you. Let me turn to Governor Christie. And considering what he just said, you led a state with a sizable Muslim population. Last month, as you know, a 6-year-old Palestinian-American boy was killed in Illinois by his landlord. His mother was also stabbed more than a dozen times in what has been charged as a hate crime. What do you say to Muslim Americans who are also feeling afraid for their safety right now?
Lester, I'm the only one on the stage who's actually had experience in dealing with this. I was appointed by President Bush to be the U.S. Attorney in New Jersey on September 10th, 2001. And when I took over that job after the September 11th attacks, I had to deal with a situation in our state that was explosive. We're the most ethnically diverse state in this country. And so first, we heard credible reports about Jewish students and synagogues being threatened in our state in the aftermath of 9/11. We made sure that we sent federal agents to those synagogues and we protected them, and the same thing should be being done now. At the very same time, I personally went from mosque to mosque in New Jersey and met with the leaders of those mosques and with the members of the mosques. And I said to them, law enforcement is on your side to protect you, regardless of your religion. if you are going to comply with the law. And we developed fabulous relationships with Muslim Americans all across the state of New Jersey, and we stopped any hate crimes that were going on either against Jewish Americans in New Jersey or Muslim Americans in New Jersey. It takes leadership, Lester, to know how to do this. You must work with both sides. Both sides need to know it, but let us never have a false moral equivalence between Hamas and Hezbollah and the Jewish people. The Jewish people stand for right and justice, and Hamas and Hezbollah stand for death.
Senator Christie, thank you. Ambassador Haley, what do you say to Americans who are simply afraid right now in this current environment that we're talking about?
I think you look at the country, and the country is all out of sorts. I think, look at what these kids are dealing with on college campuses. What makes me so angry is not only do you have the kids barricaded in the library, they've said they were going to shoot up the kosher dining hall. You've got kids' dorm rooms who are being set on fire because they have something related to Israel on their doors. No person should ever feel in danger like this. And this is what I would say about our college presidents, is if the KKK were doing this, every college president would be up in arms. This is no different. You should treat it exactly the same. Anti-Semitism is just as awful as racism, and we've got to make sure they're protected. And for everybody that's protesting on these college campuses in favor of Hamas, let me remind you something. Hamas said death to Israel and death to America. They hate and would kill you too. And the idea that they're talking about genocide for the Jewish people, that's not the values of America. That's not us. We're better than that. We don't need to celebrate terrorists. We don't need to celebrate genocide. We don't need to celebrate.
Look, here's the thing though, Nikki, is that if you actually go on a college campuses, most college campuses have a lot of people that want death to America too.
Yeah.
Talk to the commies. I do. They don't like it here.
Terrorist activity says they want to destroy them.
Ambassador, thank you. Kristen.
Lester, thank you. This is another question for the entire field, so you will all get a chance to respond. But Senator Scott, I'd like to start with you. The United States has given Ukraine financial and military support since the war began more than 600 days ago. President Zelensky told me on Sunday, if Russia isn't stopped now, quote, the price will be higher for the United States, and Americans would be forced to, quote, send your sons and daughters to defend NATO countries. Senator Scott, where do you stand on more funding for Ukraine?
I certainly have been very supportive of Ukraine. I believe that ultimately we should make sure that the President of the United States states what is America's national vital interest in Ukraine. It is actually in degrading the Russian military. We've been very effective using our resources and our weaponry and the incredibly high price of Ukrainian blood to achieve that objective. Every day we get closer to the degradation of the Russian military, and that's good news. But the American people are frustrated that they do not have a president who reminds us and tells us, where's the accountability? Where are those dollars? How are those dollars being spent? We need those answers for us to continue to see the support for Ukraine. And at the same time, I would say that a package that's been offered by the president for Ukraine and Israel, that's the wrong approach. We need to focus specifically on providing Israel with the $14 billion that they need so that we show the world that we are 100% undeniably standing shoulder to shoulder with Israel. And then as we turn away from that direct support for Israel, we should go to our southern border and close our southern border with the resources necessary. I believe that we have sleeper terrorist cells in America. Thousands of people have come from Yemen, Iran, Syria, and Iraq. If we are going to deal with the national security emergency at our border, we have to do it now.
Senator Scott, thank you. But just to be very clear, if you were president, if you were in the Oval Office today, would you sign off on more military funding for Ukraine, or would you discontinue it?
Bottom line is we have to first have the level of accountability that allows the American people to understand where the resources have gone. Number one. Number two, after we have that responsibility taken care of and accountability, then we have an opportunity to look at the overall strategy that helps us degrade the Russian military while we use our resources and, frankly, keeping our NATO partners safe from the Russian military is absolutely essential, as you understand. Article 5 would require
Ukraine is not a
to
NATO
support and to defend NATO,
ally.
our troops on the ground. The fastest way for us to eliminate that possibility is for us to destroy, to the extent possible, the Russian military. By doing so, we actually achieve the objective of keeping our military home. And that's good news.
Thank you, Senator Scott. Mr. Ramaswamy, are you persuaded by President Zelensky's urgent new plea? Where do you stand on more funding?
I'm absolutely unpersuaded. And I'm actually enjoying watching the
absolutely
Ukraine hawks
unpersuaded.
quietly, delicately tiptoe back from their position as this thing has unwound into a disaster. The first half of this race, I was the only person standing for it. Now they're actually quietly coming around to being more cautious, as they should. Level with the American people here. Ukraine is not a paragon of democracy. This is a country that has banned 11 opposition parties. It has consolidated all media into one state TV media arm. That's not democratic. It has threatened not to hold elections this year unless the U.S. forks over more money. That is not democratic. It has celebrated a Nazi in its ranks, the comedian in cargo pants, a man called Zelensky, doing it in their own ranks. That is not democratic. More facts for you that you won't hear from the mainstream in either party or the mainstream media. The regions of Ukraine that are occupied by Russia right now in the Donbass, Luhansk, Donetsk. These are Russian-speaking regions that have not even been part of Ukraine since 2014, that other people probably couldn't name those provinces for you. Those are the hard facts. And so to frame this as some kind of battle between good versus evil, don't buy it. And I'd like the likes of the sharpest of the war hawks on Ukraine, Nikki Haley, to have some accountability and answer. Do you want to use U.S. taxpayer money to fund the banning of Christians? That is actually what's happening. They're using the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. They have banned them. The Ukrainian parliament just did this last week, supported by our dollars. And I think you owe it to the American people, Nikki, to at least this one time
Ramaswamy,
condemn.
thank you. That's time.
At least to
Mr.
condemn
Ramaswamy,
their
thank
banning
you.
of Christians.
Mr. Ramaswamy,
Or else
thank
we're
you.
talking out of both sides
Mr.
of the
Ramaswamy, thank you. We asked the questions. Ambassador Haley, what is
We
your
asked the
take on
questions.
more funding for Ukraine?
I am telling you, Putin and President Xi are salivating at the thought that someone like that could become president. They would love to
The
see
fact of the matter is she doesn't answer
So
the
this is
question.
what I will tell you.
We're driving
first
Russia
of all,
into
let's
China's
remember-
hands
Ramaswamy,
because of
you
these
had
foolish
your time
policies.
to talk. The ambassador has the floor.
Thank
Ambassador
you. The
Keith.
first thing I'll tell you is we all remember what that thug did when he invaded Ukraine. We all know that 500,000 people have died because of Putin. And here is a freedom-loving, pro-American country that is fighting for its survival and its democracy.
I don't
I
really
don't
think
think we should give
no,
them
it's
cash.
not
I think we should give them the equipment and the
You liar.
ammunition to win.
Necessarily
And I'll tell you, if
pro-American.
Biden had done it
You
when
liar.
they first asked for it, this war would be over. But let's also remember this. When you left Afghanistan in shambles and left them with a ton of weapons and money, it's not that we left, it's how we left. When you look at Ukraine, don't think for a second, now everybody wants to move away from Ukraine. They'll want to move away from Israel a year from now. America can never be so arrogant to think we don't need friends. After 9/11, we needed a lot of friends. Now is the time to get partnerships. This unholy alliance between Russia, Ukraine, and China is real. There is a reason the Taiwanese want us to support the Ukrainians. It's because they know that China's coming after them next. There is a reason Ukrainians want us to support Israelis, because they know that if Iran wins, Russia wins.
Ambassador.
We have to see the combination of the three.
Ambassador, thank you. Governor Christie, what is your take, and how long should Americans be expected to help fund the war in Ukraine?
Kirsten, let's remember the last time that we turned our back on a shooting war in Europe. It bought us just a couple of years. And then 500,000 Americans were killed in Europe to defeat Hitler. This is not a choice.
You're really going to compare Putin
This
to
is the
Hitler?
price we pay for being the leaders of the free world.
Really?
And the fact is, this alliance is not just with Russia and China. Governor Haley knows this. Iran is in the middle of this as well,
Can I
and
just
so
say
is
something?
North Korea.
I don't want to interrupt him, but
And they are
he's
all
boring, so I'm gonna
working
interrupt
to
him.
support Russia right now. And the reason they're doing it is because
Putin is not a threat. He is not Hitler. He is not smooth talking. He has no relative power. I know it seems like he has power. He has no relative power compared to Hitler. He is not a threat the way Hitler is. To even try to connect those two in any way is so historically unfactual. I'm sorry, as a history, I'm so pissed at that. Shut up, fatty.
Shut up, fatty. No, it's okay, Rant.
An American promise that's 31
Yeah,
years old is no different than an American promise that's made tonight on this stage. We need to stand by it. And those of us who forget history are doomed to repeat it. And the
white body right there.
And the absolute giving in to dictators, which is being suggested on this stage, just shows the immaturity of the approach.
Governor Christie, thank you. Governor DeSantis, I'd like you to weigh in on this idea. Are you concerned that this could become a wider war if Putin is not stopped now?
Well, any suggestion by Zelensky or anyone else that we're going to eventually have U.S. troops there, I can tell the American people when I'm president, that will not happen. We are not going to send your sons and daughters to Ukraine.
That's my favorite answer.
I am going to send troops to our southern border. If you look at the threats that we face, terrorists have come in through our southern border. I'm going to shut it down. I'm going to have the military, and I'm going to deport the people who've come, particularly under Biden, who've come from the Middle East, come from all these places. Now, Biden wants $105 billion. 60, most of that's Ukraine, including some of it going to pay pensions for bureaucrats and salaries. That is a totally ridiculous use of American tax dollars. He says he has money for border to try to do, and the media repeat that. When you look at it, what most of the money is money to process more illegal aliens into this country. How is that solving the problem? That's making the problem worse. And what does he do for the Indo-Pacific? A pittance. That is the top threat that we face. We need to bring this war to an end. We need the Europeans to step up and do their fair share. And we need to get serious about the top threat that this country faces, which is the Chinese Communist Party.
So if I may respond to the Ukraine question.
In fact, we are going to go from the hot wars in Ukraine and Gaza and Israel to what many people are calling the new Cold War with China. And I remind the audience.
What did I say? This is all stuff I said. All of these.
Hear you, and especially for the people in Beijing.
I predicted all of this.
Many Republicans believe that the Chinese Communist Party and General Secretary Xi is an existential threat to the United States. The flashpoint is Taiwan. For decades and decades, the American military, but primarily the United States Navy, has deterred an attack from China to the island state of Taiwan. But Ronald Reagan's Navy of 600 ships is gone. Now, the question to you is, and I'll start with you, Ambassador Haley, because you were in President Trump's cabinet. His goal was a 355-ship Navy. That's what he pushed for. He got to 300. It's now at 291. Is that big enough to deter and, if necessary, defeat an invasion of Taiwan?
China has the largest naval fleet in the world. They have 350 ships. They'll have 400 ships in 2 years. We won't even have 350 ships in 2 decades. China has built up their military. It's not just land, air, and sea. They're doing cyber. They're doing artificial intelligence. They're doing space. America needs to modernize our military. We need to do everything we can. The first thing is you go and you make sure you have the backs of Ukraine. That's why the Taiwanese want us to support Ukraine, because they know that sends the biggest message to China. The second thing is we go to China and we start being tough on them. No more sales of our American soil to China, and let's take back what they've already stolen. Then you go and you to the universities. No more having millions of dollars go to our universities. Then we will go and end all formal trade relations with China until they stop murdering Americans from fentanyl, something Ron has yet to say that he's going to do. And then we modernize our military. When we strengthen our military, when we modernize it with the focus of cyber, artificial intelligence, and space, when we make sure that we have the backs of our friends, whether it's in Israel, whether it's in Ukraine, and we should be arming Taiwan. Make sure they have the equipment they need. Make sure they have the training they need now. There's nothing China fears more than knowing that America will have Taiwan's back. Let's make sure that we show it by making sure they have the equipment they need.
Governor DeSantis.
See, the thing is I don't think that could actually happen in practice, like the trade thing and everything.
Yeah, I want to hear his answer to that, actually.
Would you build if you were going to build more?
Not enough. We have to have the ability to back up a strategy of denial of President Xi's ambitions. And if China is able to be the world's leading superpower, that will affect you and your family in ways that are going to be very bad. They will export authoritarianism all around the world as the cost of doing business. They will impose things like social credit scores and internet monitoring. So this is to this generation what the Soviet Union was to the post-World War II generation. I've already released a plan. We're going to get to 355 ships at the end of the first term, 385 ships at the end of the second term, but we're going to have a path to 600 ships over the next 20 years. I think the future of freedom is going to be determined in the Indo-Pacific. We have a strategy not just military, but decoupling from the economy and fighting them here at home with their cultural. You know, Ambassador Haley said somehow I wasn't doing. She welcomed them into South Carolina, gave them land near a military base, wrote the Chinese ambassador a love letter saying what a great friend they were. That was like their number one way to do economic development. In Florida, I banned China from buying land in this state, and we kicked out
There it is.
on our universities,
There
and we
it
kicked
is.
the Confucius Institutes out of our universities. We've recognized the threat, and we've acted swiftly and decisively.
Senator Scott, you've been in the Congress since 2011. Defense spending has fallen over that entire period of time. Where are we going to get the money, and what would you build, and what kind of ships to deter China from attacking Taiwan?
Well, two major problems with the question. Number one, we do not have currently a defense industrial bank to allow us to have the kind of production that we need in order to keep America safe. Frankly, if we are not prepared to fight and engage in 3 continents at the same time, think about where we are today. In the Middle East, we are in the midst of trying to back our strongest ally. In Eastern Europe, we've seen our resources and our weaponry help degrade the Russian military. The Indo-Pacific, we have real challenges. The long-term threat is China. Immediate threat is our southern border. In order for us to have the military to fight 3 different continents at the exact same time, we are going to have to invest heavily in our military, but we're also going to have to invest heavily in an industrial base so that we can hit our objectives from a military perspective, not only with our ships, but also with our planes. We are so old as a military that in order for us to recalibrate, we're going to have to invest. One of the things I do in my Made in America strategy is we create more than 4 million new jobs by having high-tech manufacturing come back to America, decoupling from China, so that we focus our attention on creating that industrial revolution that will be necessary for us to achieve the goal of having a military that is ready to be lethal and come home safe.
Thank you, Senator. Mr. Ramaswamy, I'm looking for specifics. What would you build? Where would you build it? When would they be in the water? How big would the fleet get?
First answer is end the toxic divest to invest program. For people who don't know about that, we're decommissioning ships in the South China Sea. The foundation of war is economics. Rebuild our defense industrial base at home. But here's the dirty little secret. Our actual defense industrial base depends on China for the supply chain, for the F-35 jets, for the ships that we're building. Think about this. Why are we stockpiling that if it isn't to actually be strong against our enemy, China? We depend on them for that. Just like we depend on them for pharmaceuticals, just like we depend on them for semiconductors. So here's why we can't get tough with China. It's because we depend on them for our modern way of life, and we have to declare economic independence from our enemy. That's the Declaration of Independence that Thomas Jefferson, at the age of 33, would have signed. And today, if he were alive, that's the Declaration of Independence that I will sign as the next president. I do have to recognize that Ron Desantis was correct about acknowledging Nikki Haley's tough talk when she was ambassador to the UN, calling China our great friend, bringing the CCP to South Carolina. What he left out, though, Ron, and be honest about it, there was a lobbying-based exemption in that bill that allowed Chinese nationals to buy land within a 20-mile radius of a military base lobbied for by one of your donors. So I think we have to call a spade a spade. We need politicians who are independent of the forces that increase our dependence on China. My message to Xi Jinping is this. You are done buying land in this country. You will not donate to universities in this country. U.S. businesses won't expand into the Chinese market until you play by the same set of rules.
Mr. Ramaswamy,
you're kicked out of the WTO, and you actually have to have accountability for the COVID-19 pandemic financially, which unleashed hell on the world. We have to hold them accountable.
Do you have a number and a plan?
I think that we need to increase our naval capacity by at least 20% over the course of the next several years. Be able to meet our AUKUS agreement standards. Right now, we are at risk of not even being able to meet our AUKUS standards with Australia and the UK. So what we need to do is have a plan that reverses the trajectory of the divest to invest program
I'd like to
by 20% over the next 3 years.
Governor Christie?
You know, my first observation, Hugh, is that nobody answers your And my second observation is these three in the middle think they're the enemy. I know China is the enemy, and that's what we should be focused on. So let's be really clear. The nuclear submarines in this United States Navy is the greatest deterrent to Chinese aggression, and that is the first place I would go to increase American naval power. Our nuclear submarines are able to move stealthily, quietly, and effectively. And if we are going to deter China from invading Taiwan, the only way we're going to do it is to make sure that they don't know whether how many nuclear submarines from the United States of America are in the South China Sea and in that area and ready to strike on them if they decide to move on Taiwan. And so we, as our first priority, need to go directly to our nuclear sub program, Hugh, and we need to increase it drastically. That would be priority number one. Ships would come next, but to me, the ships are secondary choice here. The submarines are the single most important thing that we could be using to deter China. But the other thing we could do to deter China is to let them know that the blood money they're spending for Russia in Ukraine right now will not be effective, that we send Putin home with his tail between his legs and make them understand that the same fate waits for them if they decide to move towards Taiwan with a more aggressive nuclear sub-program. We'll be able to make that threat
You don't even
real.
really want to be
Thank you,
there.
Governor. We're going to take a brief
Scott
pause now, and we'll be back to the Republican presidential primary debate. Please stay tuned.
They waited almost an hour for a break.
I know. I was kind of surprised by that. I was not expecting them to go a full hour without a break. Let me get my headphones back on here. No, I was not expecting them to go a full hour without a break. Currently, it almost looks like it's frozen. I don't know if they're just going to like wait.
Maybe because of the ads.
I know, but I thought maybe they would have the ads going. There we go. Or they're just like, screw it. We're going to stop doing all of this now. I don't know. Let's see how many viewers this thing has right now. Everybody's logging off right now, but it was near 70,000 on here. Interesting. Okay, thoughts so far on what's going on?
I mean, we predicted how this first half would go.
We did, in fact, do that. I mean, I said all of it. I was like, it's going to be Israel, Palestine. That's going to be the starter. And then they're going to jump into Ukraine. And then they're going to try to bring up Taiwan. And they did. And that's exactly what they did for the majority of.
So the rest is probably going to be domestic. And that's
I'd say a lot of domestic. I'd be very interested to see if there's advertisements. Okay. I'd be very interested to see if they bring up like social issues or what I want to talk about. I want to talk about trannies. I want to talk about all that kind of stuff, like, and preserving truth in the country. And also one thing I've always liked that Vivek says and talks about is the lack of a national identity. I like that kind of conversation. Those are things I appreciate from him a lot. Let's see
funny.
what other people got going on here. But keep talking.
It's funny because I was going to say, because I remember I said, the first debate, he went all tough guy. Second, he was all nice guy. This one, he's all angry guy. And he's playing these different roles. And I think personally, I think it makes it look a little disingenuous. He's trying to play a part. I think he's trying to see what works.
Yeah. Really what
he's still figuring it out, where these other guys kind of have it figured out.
That's because the thing is that everybody else has some level of a national kind of people know like what their brand is. Like, in terms of like who they are. And so like DeSantis, like he knows he kind of needs to soften up in some areas because some people see him as aggressive. Nikki Haley, everybody kind of knows her as the UN girl and that she can be kind of abrasive, but like strong woman kind of vibes. Christie, everybody just knows he's a fat dick.
Probably
and Tim Scott's black, and that's like his thing.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I mean, and
I don't mean that like as a disparaging. It's just like the fact that that's like what he always runs on with everything. It's like, I am black. I am from South Carolina. And especially tonight, he always has talked about like being a Christian, but especially tonight, he's very preachy.
Yeah. Well, and I thought it interesting too. I mean, I think I knew Vivek was going to go for Haley. Those two have always fought. I mean, those two, I think he said some good things though. I think calling her, hey, I think DeSantis and him with, hey, you allowed China to come into your state, gave them all this land, when Vivek was like, well, one of your donors back then, he's like, well, that's not true. But even that, if you can't control what your donors do, like, I'm like, that's kind of a weird slam. Like, we know verifiably DeSantis did stop the CCP from buying land in Florida. We know that.
Yeah, I want to talk about this clip real quick here. I've been just watching what's trending on Twitter during all of this. Let's take a look at this clip from the debate.
Different generation is going to put this country first, or do you want Dick Cheney in 3-inch heels? Two of them on stage.
I even missed the part where he said we've got two of them on stage. One of them that he was talking about is because there's been all this this bashing of Ron DeSantis.
Wearing cowboy boots?
Rumors that he was wearing heels or like shoe lifts or something like that.
Because he's wearing cowboy boots.
And I think one of the things that would be fascinating, and somebody said this, I'm in a group chat with some people that I know, and Harrison Feld, a friend of mine, he said Ron wins the day if he takes his shoes off on stage.
That would be
I think that'd be hilarious if Ron DeSantis just all of a sudden was like, hey, by the way, looky here, I do not wear lifts.
It reminds me of
we're coming back here, so quick.
It reminds me of when Trump had Jimmy Fallon mess with his hair.
Oh yeah.
Real.
It's real. It's real. Here we go.
America's preeminent adversary, one used to push propaganda and divide America. It's spyware, he said, a means of surveillance. Governor Christie, do you agree with Chairman Gallagher? And if so, would you ban or force the sale of TikTok?
I agree 100% with Chairman Gallagher. And let me say this. TikTok is not only spyware, it is polluting the minds of American young people all throughout this country. And they're doing it intentionally. And when you saw what happened in the last few weeks with all of this anti-Semitic, horrible stuff that their algorithms were pushing out at a gargantuan rate, this is China trying to further divide the United States of America. And this is one of the big failings among many of the Trump administration. He talked tough about TikTok. I heard him do it many times. But when it came down to it, he did not ban them when he could have and should have. And now since then, we've had an additional nearly 6 years of this type of poison being put out throughout the United States, even putting aside the spying, which we know is going on, and the theft of American personal data and information. So in my first week as president, we would ban TikTok. They want to go ahead and sell it, let them go ahead and sell it. But I'll tell you another reason we would do it. Facebook's not in China. X is not in China. They're not permitting a free flow of information to the Chinese people from our social media companies, yet we just open the door and let them do what they're doing. TikTok should be banned.
Curious to see what Vivek says about this.
Minds, and I would do it week one.
Thank you, Governor. I want to go to Governor DeSantis. Would you ban or force the sale of TikTok, regardless of whether or not China allowed American apps to operate in China?
Yes, I think that China is the top threat we face. They've been very effective at infiltrating different parts of our society. So my policy on China and the Chinese Communist Party is very simple. We win, they lose. And in order to do that, it's not just military, it's economic, and it's cultural. And as the dad of a 6'5" and a 3-year-old, I'm concerned about the data that they're getting from our young people and what they're doing to pollute the minds of our young people. These kids get these devices and they have a mind of their own. And I know a lot of parents are looking, it's hard to even keep it out. China's obviously the most extreme, but this is happening with other things. So we are going to do that, and we are going to make sure to protect the American people. It's a full spectrum approach to be able to fend China off. Yes, military deterrence. Yes, economic decoupling, but also their role in our culture. If we ignore that, we're not going to be able to win the fight.
Thank you.
That's a great answer.
Speak to the parents out there. There are probably TikTok apps on half the phones in this auditorium.
No, I'm going to speak to the fact that 2 people hit me and you didn't let me respond. So let's first talk about the fact that they want to talk about the Chinese land from 10 years ago. Yes, I brought a fiberglass company 10 years ago to South Carolina. But Ron, you are the chair of your economic development agency that as of last week said Florida is the ideal place for Chinese businesses. Not only that, you have a company that is manufacturer of Chinese military planes. You have it. They are expanding 2 training sites at 2 of your airports now, one which is 12 miles away from a naval base. Then you have another company that's expanding, and they were just invaded by the Department of Homeland Security. So mine was 10 years ago.
You gave
Yours
them
was
stuff.
6
I
months
didn't
ago.
give them anything.
What's your story?
And
All
I
right, back to
abolished
break,
that
everybody.
agency that she's talking about.
No,
Enterprise Florida.
Here it
We
is.
abolished it, and of course we banned
He
China from
scrubbed
buying
the
land.
website
Not
last
exactly
week.
a
Go
great
check.
recruiting
I
pitch
want
if you're
to,
banning them from
You
purchasing land
scrubbed
at
the
all.
website
So we've
last
stood up
week.
and
Thank you,
we've done the
Ambassador
right thing
Haley.
in Florida.
Mr. Ramaswamy, we've talked about this. You campaign
I'm
on
surprised
TikTok.
it's the first fight
How
they've
do you
had.
get TikTok banned if you use it?
Well, I want to laugh at why Nikki Haley didn't answer your question, which is about looking at families in the eye. In the last debate, she made fun of me for actually joining TikTok while her own daughter was actually using the app for a long time. So you might want to take care of your family first.
Leave my
before
daughter
preaching
out
to
of your
I
voice.
agree.
adult daughter.
I agree.
The
That's-
next generation of Americans
Yeah, that
are
was-
using
that was-
it.
I don't like
and
that.
That's actually the point.
I don't like
You have her
that.
supporters propping her up. That's fine. Here's
That's
the
shitty.
truth.
You're
The
just
easy
dumb.
answer is actually to say that we're just going to ban one app. We got to go further. We have to ban any U.S. company actually transferring U.S. data to the Chinese.
That's
Here's
what,
a story
okay, funny
most
enough,
people
that's
don't know.
what one of my
Yeah,
colleagues
yeah.
just
Hands
said.
over U.S. user data to the CCP. Now, that's a U.S.-owned company. So this is the problem when you have Republicans that temporarily go the way the winds blow, and now it's popular to talk tough on China. When she was UN ambassador, called them literally, her words, not mine, our great friend. You can't be fair weather fans of the right policy. Get to the root cause. Even U.S. companies in Silicon Valley are regularly doing it. Cut the virtue signaling. The fact of the matter is Democrats are on TikTok today. The only person, one of the few people who is putting up content the way the actual algorithms work, speaking for pro-Israel views or others, is
Ambassador
me. And I predict
Haley,
more Republicans will join it. But stop U.S. companies from turning over data to Chinese companies. That's the real
Moderators
answer, not the
like
virtue
Christie
signal.
don't get to respond to personal attacks, but you do.
Thank you very much. You know, when he talks about me praising China, he doesn't know the fact that the reason China was praised was because I negotiated with China and Russia the largest set of sanctions against North Korea in a generation. That is literally the reason North Korea stopped testing ballistic missiles. So I said China did good on their part. That was a
You said
negotiation
our
you
great
could
friend
never
is
do.
what you said, Nikki. Those are your words, not mine. And so just
When
own up to it.
you would never
You can
have been
change
able
your
to
mind.
get
That's
that
allowed.
negotiation
But don't
done.
lie to the people about
I
what
have
you've said
fought
or what you've done in
against
South
China
Carolina.
my
You have brought
entire
them to South
career
Carolina.
at the
Ron is
United
right about
Nations.
that.
Every day I fought China, and I did it
Look at the
by
actual
making sure
hard
no
facts.
one
You
could
brought
get
them to this
any
country.
agency heads in UN. I did it by making sure that we called them out on human rights. I did it by making sure that we held them accountable on everything that they did. That's the reason we got out of the Human Rights Council. That's the reason we called them out. And there's not
Thank
been
you.
a day I haven't
Nikki,
stopped.
Senator
your
Scott,
experience wasn't
it is
your
your
foreign
turn.
policy
Mr.
experience, it was the millions
Ramaswamy.
you made afterwards.
Everybody else is hanging on to the rules here, Mr. Ramaswamy. Senator Scott.
Thank you. We should. I appreciate y'all clapping for me already. This is a wonderful answer. Without any question,
That was funny.
What we should do is ban TikTok, period.
Yeah, it was.
Now, we saw under former President Trump, he tried to ban TikTok twice, but was struck down by our federal courts. If you cannot ban TikTok, you should eliminate the Chinese presence on the app. Period. We also should provide, in my parents' Bill of Rights, we give parents the opportunity to give their kids permission under 14 to be on those apps. I think it's incredibly important for us as Americans to take back control of the information, especially of our kids. Where does it go? We should know that. One of the ways that we get to know that is by having a parental consent. But if we can eliminate TikTok, that is a first step. But it's not just TikTok. China continues to spy on our kids, but they're also buying our farmlands. We talked about that several times there. We have to make sure that we use the tools that are in our toolkit to stop China from buying farmland near our bases. The third thing we have to do is make sure that they stop stealing our intellectual property. They're literally stealing our IP to compete against us. In my administration, we stopped that day one, and we start making sure that we create six-figure income for jobs made in America
Thank you, Senator.
through my strategy.
Kristen.
Q, thank you so much. We're now going to talk about Venezuela, where millions have fled political and economic turmoil. Many Venezuelan immigrants are settling right here in Florida. Former President Trump and President Biden have taken different approaches to Nicolas Maduro's regime with little result. Former President Trump put economic pressure on Venezuela and backed one of Maduro's rivals. President Biden temporarily eased sanctions to encourage electoral reforms. Governor DeSantis, do you see the political situation in Venezuela as a threat to the United States, and what would your approach be?
We should never rely on Venezuela for oil like Biden has had to go beg. I'm going to unleash all of America's energy potential. On day one, I'm taking all the Biden regulations, the Green New Deal, ripping it up and throwing it in the trash can where it belongs. We're going to lower your gas prices. We're going to create jobs. We're going to lower energy costs, but we're also going to be more energy independent and secure. We'll choose Midland over Moscow. We'll choose the Marcellus over the Mullahs, and we'll choose Bakken over Beijing. That is good for America's national security. Biden's Green New Deal, that's good for Venezuela, it's good for Russia, it's good for Iran, and it's good for China. So I would turn the screws on the Venezuelan regime. I think it's a corrupt, dictatorial regime, and we should never go hat in hand begging for oil from them.
Just to be clear, would you reimpose the sanctions?
Yes, absolutely.
Ambassador Haley, what would your approach be?
You know, I stood on the Simon Bolivar Bridge and watched thousands of Venezuelans cross for hours in the hot sun, holding their babies to get the one meal they might get that day, going from Venezuela to Colombia. They were fleeing socialism and begging for freedom. We need to make sure that we do everything we can to sanction Maduro. We shouldn't be getting dirty oil. And Biden just gave 500,000 Venezuelans temporary priority status, which is just going to have more of them come. But on the energy side, it cracks me up that Ron continues to do this. He has opposed fracking. He's
trying this again.
Last time he said it wasn't true, and everybody found out that it was true. He opposed it before Florida voters even voted on it. He was praised by the Sierra Club, and you're trying to make up for it and act like you weren't a liberal when it comes to the environment. You were. You always have been. Just own it if that's the case. But don't keep saying you're something that you're not.
Let me respond to that. Our whole energy plan, you can't get the shale without fracking. We are absolutely going to frack. But I disagree with Nikki Haley. I don't think it's a good idea to drill in the Florida Everglades, and I know most Floridians agree with me.
You banned fracking.
Thank you very much.
To one of the biggest issues for voters, that of course is the economy. This is a question that will go to all of you. An Iowa voter recently told NBC News, "How am I going to make sure my pantry's stocked without breaking the bank?" You've all said the best way to deal with rising prices is to cut government spending. But that would take time to play out, and Americans are struggling right now. Senator Scott, I'll start with you. What would you do the moment you take office to help Americans manage the cost of living? So we're talking about short term here.
My mother was a single mother who raised me and my brother in a very challenging economic situation. The first thing I can tell you is that when your gas prices are 40% higher right now than they were just a little over 2 years ago, that's not a problem for my mama. That was a crisis. The first thing I would do as President of the United States is I would sign the XL Keystone Pipeline and start seeing resources flow. Second thing I would do is make sure that there's certainty and predictability so that those folks who have the leases in our country would have the certainty and predictability to go ahead and become energy independent. We should focus not just on being energy independent, we should focus on being energy dominant. America is the home to more energy resources than any other country on the planet. We can reduce the price of energy, we can reduce the price of food and the price of electricity if we focus on my build here, don't borrow from China plan that is embedded. The Made in America strategy creates 10 million new jobs in 3 different areas. One is innovation. Second is the high-tech manufacturing. And the third is the energy economy. We have an opportunity as Americans to actually export the surplus energy that we create in our nation and disconnect from China and from murderous dictators and tyrants around the world.
Your time is up, but let me just follow up. The idea of pumping gas, of turning on pipelines, that doesn't make gas cheaper that day. I'm talking about you become president. What can you do specifically to help people feel better about their situation or be better with their situation?
Well, actually, it does, to be honest with you. The way that the economy works is it works on the ability to anticipate excess supply versus the demand. When that happens, confidence drives our prices down because we know there's going to be a greater surplus. When you allow for those who have leases to actually start drilling, to start using those leases for more energy excavation, you put our economy in the strongest position. And as a result of that, prices start going down. That is the kind of economy that, as president of the United States, I would lead this nation to making sure that we first use the resources in our own country and not going outside of our country in order to achieve our objective. You know, Proverbs 22:7 reminds us that the borrower is slave to the lender. We have become an indentured servant too often to countries like China. By having an energy economy, we start allowing this nation to once again return.
Senator, thank you. Let me ask the same question to Governor DeSantis. Can you give us some, you ticked off a number of things a moment ago, but some specific examples of ways that would put people on a better economic footing right away?
So I started off working minimum wage jobs. I did $6 an hour as an electrician's assistant. I worked all kinds of things to be able to get through school. And I did that because I believed in America, if you work hard and get the most out of your God-given ability, you can get ahead. And what's happening now, many of you are working hard and you're falling further and further behind. I've met people in Iowa, New Hampshire, and all across the country who've talked about all the burdens that they're facing with the rising prices. And I've heard from multiple people the same story. When they go grocery shopping, what they now do is they figure out what they have to take out of the cart once it's ringing up, because it rings up so much faster and so much higher at the cash register that they can't afford the full cart of groceries anymore. We have to restore the American dream in this country. What can you do on day one? Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take all the executive orders, the regulations, everything involving Bidenomics. I'm going to rip it up. And I'm going to throw it in the trash can on day one where it belongs. That is going to give the economy breathing room. And I'm also going to rein in the Federal Reserve. They have helped create, with their reckless monetary policy, what we have faced since the COVID-19 pandemic. They botched it. Congress botched it. Both parties are to blame. Fed should focus on stable prices. They are not an economic central planner for the American people.
Governor, thank you. Mr. Ramaswamy, weigh in on this.
Sure.
Ways that you can improve people's financial condition in the short term.
Right. And as a CEO, the economic question is core to my vision and policy prescription for this country. Increase the supply of everything. It's the law of supplies and demand. Increase the supply of energy. That brings down the cost of energy, grows the economy. Drill, frack, burn coal, embrace nuclear. Increase the supply of labor in this country. Stop using our taxpayer money to pay people more to stay at home instead of to go to work. Increase the supply of housing. People don't talk about this one in the Republican Party. The land use restrictions are constricting the supply of housing. That's making housing more expensive for ordinary Americans across this country. So that's the true answer. And I think it takes a CEO in the White House who actually understands this to get this done. Because Americans at home, they know the Bidenomics is a lie. Prices are going up. Interest rates and mortgages to buy your home are going up. But wages have remained flat. That's the hard diagnosis for our economy. And this is about more than just our economy. I say this as a member of my generation. I'm 38 years old. I'm the youngest person ever to run for U.S. president as a Republican. The reason my generation has lost our sense of national pride in part is because people in my generation feel like the American dream isn't available to them. And part of the reason why is we've burdened them with four-year college degrees that did not serve their head start on the American dream. People will be more proud of a country if we're all making more money in that country. This is how we revive national pride and our identity, and it will take a CEO in the White House with zero-based budgeting, by the way, to take on the federal debt to get this job done. Let me turn to
Governor Christie on that.
Well, look, Lester, part of the entire premise of the question, and I agree with Tim on this, is absolutely energy is the key to this because it drives every one of those other prices. You know, now food gets to your grocery store, it gets trucked. And those truckers have to pay for fuel and for the higher fuel prices. And when you go ahead and you tell people, we are going to unleash every bit of American energy, every bit of its potential, what happens in the futures markets? The prices go down. because those people who are believing that the Biden program will continue are the ones who are bidding this up. And let me tell you the other place that's bidding it up, in the Middle East. And so if you don't believe that making sure that Israel and that Israel situation that's going on right now isn't resolved and resolved quickly as President of the United States and bring stability back, that will also not permit countries like Saudi Arabia and others to be able to jack their prices as well in what they say is in response to a crisis, when it's really what it's in response to is putting more money in their pockets. When they have an American president who knows that Israel must be defended not with humanitarian pauses and not with suggestions for ceasefire, but with letting them know we will supply them with everything they need, that will also bring stability to the market.
What?
Energy is the key to bringing this down.
I don't
Every
understand.
American
I don't
family needs-
understand how sending everything that Israel needs and just being like blindly supportive of Israel in every little way is going to help it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense.
Now, it might help your pocket, Christie. Maybe with some military donors or something, but I don't know. Screw that guy.
Households about an extra $5,000. How would you specifically help rural Americans who are suffering right now, Ambassador?
Well, I'm a product of rural America. I grew up in rural South Carolina. And I can tell you what we're seeing now in America is the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. We have to go and start beefing up the middle class. And the first thing I would do is I will eliminate the federal gas and diesel tax in this country. We'll cut taxes on the middle class. But we have to stop this spending binge that's happening by Republicans and Democrats in Congress. I will make sure, one, we claw back the $500 billion of unspent COVID dollars that are out there. Instead of 87,000 IRS agents going after middle America, we'll go after the hundreds of billions of dollars of COVID fraud that exist, one out of every $7. We'll stop the spending, we'll stop the borrowing, we'll eliminate the earmarks, and I'll veto any spending bill that doesn't go back to pre-COVID levels. That will cut trillions and allow us to be safe. We also need to be not energy independent, energy dominant. We are blessed with resources. Let's do it. But the reason no one should give you a number, Hugh, on the amount of ships in the Navy is because in a few years, our interest expense is going to be more than our defense budget. So no one can give you that number realistically without first tackling what's happening with the financial situation. It would be a false number to give you that. We have got to understand this is a crisis. It is a national security concern. If we don't deal with what's going to happen with that interest expense in a few years, we're going to look like Japan. And we can't let that happen. The strong dollar matters.
Ambassador, thank you very much. Christian.
Americans could see their Social Security benefits drastically cut in the next decade because the program is running out of money. Former President Trump has said, quote, under no circumstances should Republicans cut entitlements. Governor Christie, first to you. You have proposed raising the retirement age for younger Americans.
Cut all entitlements.
What would that age be specifically, and would you consider making any other reforms to Social Security?
Medicare.
Sure, and we have to deal with this problem. Now, look, if we raise the retirement age a few years for folks that are in their 30s and 40s, I have a son who's in the audience tonight who's 30 years old. If he can't adjust to a few-year increase in Social Security retirement age over the next 40 years, I got bigger problems with him than his Social Security payments. And the fact is, we need to be realistic about this. There are only three things that go into determining whether Social Security can be solvent or not: retirement age, eligibility for the program in general, and taxes. That's it. We are already overtaxed in this country, and we should not raise those taxes. But on eligibility also, I don't know if out there tonight, and if you're watching Warren, I don't know if Warren Buffett is collecting Social Security, but if he is, shame on you. You shouldn't be taking the money. There are a lot of programs in this country that we all pay for that we don't get a direct benefit from. Food stamps is one of them. I've never, fortunately in my life, ever had me or my family on food stamps, but I'm glad it's there so that no one in this country goes to bed hungry at night if they have availability to that program. But I don't get a direct benefit. The fact is, on Social Security, remember why it was established. It was established as a safety net program to make sure that no one would grow old in this country in poverty. That's what we got to get back to. Rich people should not be collecting Social Security.
Governor, can you give me a specific age, 69, 70? What would the age be?
No, look, that's going to be a part of a negotiation with Congress, Kirsten. And hell, I'm not going to start negotiating until I get there.
All right,
You're not
Ambassador
gonna
Haley,
get there.
You're not gonna get there.
weigh in on this because you said in June that you would be open to raising the retirement age. Have you determined what that age would be specifically, and what other reforms are you looking at?
So first of all, any candidate that tells you that they're not going to take on entitlements is not being serious. Social Security will go bankrupt in 10 years. Medicare will go bankrupt in 8. Right now, you have Ron and Trump joining Biden and Pelosi saying they're not going to change or do any sort of entitlement reform. What we need to do is keep our promises. Those that have been promised should keep it. But for like my kids in their 20s, you go and you say, we're going to change the rules. You change the retirement age for them. Instead of cost of living increases, we should go to increases based on inflation. We should limit benefits on the wealthy. Bernie Marcus can tell you he hates getting that check. Limit the benefits on the wealthy, and then expand Medicare Advantage plans. Seniors love that. And let's make sure we do that so that they can have more competition. That's how we'll deal with entitlement reform, and that's how we'll start to pay down this debt.
And can you give me a specific age? Have you determined the age?
Again, you have to work with Chris. What I can tell you is it's going to be those in their 20s just coming into the system, and it should reflect more of life expectancy. It doesn't do that now.
All right, Mr. Ramaswamy, have you determined if you would touch entitlements and Social Security? What, if any, reforms are you looking at?
So this is really important right now. We're working within the last window I believe we will have to actually fix this problem while still leaving Social Security and Medicare benefits for current seniors intact. I'll tell you how. The other candidates assume, like Nikki, that it can't be done. And on her math, she's right about it. But her math assumes $7 trillion of our $33 trillion national debt going to fight wars like in places like Iraq and Afghanistan. Minus that, our national debt would be $26 trillion right now. Then you go to zero-based budgeting, which I've proposed as a CEO. It's how I've run businesses. It's how many CEOs run businesses. Don't use last year's budget as the baseline. Start with zero as the baseline and then ask what's actually necessary. 75% headcount reduction. Yes, that is severe in the number of federal employees in the Washington, D.C. bureaucracy. Shut down redundant agencies that should not exist. Deliver economic growth as a positive tailwind. I think we can get to 3, 4, maybe even 5% GDP growth if we really take the regulatory shackles off of our economy. And against that backdrop, I believe this is our last best window to be able to take care of our national debt problem through those severe measures, including sacrificing the foreign wars that many bloodthirsty members of both parties have a hunger for. That's the one secret for how we're going to be able to do this, and that requires discipline. So we can't have the first conversation we were having, sending foreign aid willy-nilly to countries whose national debt per capita is less than ours.
Thank you,
But if we
Mr.
do this
Ramaswamy.
correctly, I think this is our last window, and it'll take a CEO from the next generation to do it.
Thank you very much. Senator Scott, weigh in here. What are you looking at to keep Social Security sustainable?
The bottom line is a simple one. We have to grow our economy and cut our spending. Let me just say to my mama and to every other mama or grandfather receiving Social Security, as President of the United States, I will protect your Social Security. The fact is that we're spending today about $1.1 trillion of Social Security, about $750 billion on Medicare, about $300 billion on Medicaid, about $400 billion on veterans benefits, $1.7 trillion on annual appropriations. If we're going to actually tame this tiger, the way you do it is not by picking on seniors who have paid into a program that deserve their money coming back out to them. The way you deal with it is, number one, you have to grow your economy. My plan, Made in America, creates 10 million new jobs, grows our economy at 5%. By doing so, you add trillions of dollars of economic activity and billions of dollars to your treasury. Number two, you have to cut taxes. When we cut taxes in 2017, I wrote the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Everybody said, well, guess what? Revenue will go down. Well, in 2018, after we wrote it in 2017, what happened? Revenue went up by 3%. And the next year, it went up by another 3%. So what we know is that the Laffer curve still works. But the lower the tax, the higher the revenue. And finally, if we're going to deal with it, we have to take our annual appropriations back to pre-2020, pre-COVID levels of spending, which would save us about $500 billion in the next budget window. By doing that, we deal with Social Security and our mandatory spending.
Thank you, Senator. Very quickly, would you raise the retirement age? Would you be open to raising the retirement age, or do you rule that out?
All you have to do is go to a farm in Iowa.
Said very quickly, he's like,
the dedication.
Yeah, he's
Yes
you
or
and
no,
I
though,
having
Senator?
a conversation.
Yes or
Our
no?
answer is no, but listen to this. So before you go on, thank you. The fact of the matter is that the more physical your labor, a year or 2 or 3 more is actually challenging to the physical body. You and I might have a different perspective, but for those farmers, they're working night and day.
Thank you, Senator. I appreciate it. Governor DeSantis, finally to you, would you be open to raising the retirement age, and how would you keep Social Security sustainable?
Well, look, as governor of Florida, I know a few people on Social Security, and I know it's important. My grandmother lived till 91, and Social Security was her sole source of income. And that's true for a lot of seniors throughout this country. So what I'd say to seniors in America, promise made, promise kept. I understand what you're going through with the rising prices, and you need that Social Security check. So we'll make sure to get that done. What can you do to help shore up Social Security? One of the things that's causing problems is the inflation. We have to reduce inflation. When you have higher inflation, the seniors get a cost of living adjustment, which means the program's spending more, but it doesn't cover the increase in the actual inflation rate. We also do need to get to at least 3% growth. You're never going to be able to have issues, be able to solve the budget without that. But I would note this. Congress for decades took money from Social Security. Social Security would have more tax revenue than it put out. They would take it and then they'd write an IOU to Social Security. Congress has a lot of dirty hands on this. I'm going to force Congress to stop spending so much money. And, you know, one thing we have to do, we talk about the retirement age, is just something that's changed in the last 4 or 5 years. Life expectancy in the United States is declining.
So, Governor,
in this
yes
country.
Or no? Would you raise it? Would you raise the retirement age?
When life expectancy is declining, I don't see how you could raise it the other direction. So it's one thing to peg it on life expectancy, but we have had a significant decline in life expectancy in this country, and that's just the fact.
All right, Governor DeSantis, thank you. Thank you, candidates. And we will be right back after a quick break from Miami, Florida.
All right. First off, I hate Social Security. I don't know if I'm in the minority here. But like Jim said down here that I just pulled up on stage, wish I could have kept all the money I've paid into Social Security and put it into my own account. That's where I'm at with it. Look, I'm 100% on board with the idea of people that are currently collecting it, people that are near the age of collecting it and like do not have enough time to actually plan. Of course, promise made, promise kept.
Yeah.
Makes sense. But we need to begin phasing it out. And it's my generation, if we do it the way I would so generously offer, is that my generation will continue to pay Social Security, but we also get significant tax breaks in other areas. And we also got to work on inflation and all that other shit too. But if we get set tax breaks in other areas, we'll continue to pay Social Security and allow people to be dependent on the state in full knowledge that we will not collect Social Security. And then where we receive our other tax breaks that seniors do not, wherever that may be in our budget, then we are able to put that into our own accounts. I would like to be able to put all of my tax money into my Roth IRA. But alas, I'm going to pay into what is called a failed investment. The entire idea of Social Security is a Ponzi scheme, and I hate it. It's this idea of, hey, we're going to bet that you die. And so then we are going to, if we bet that you die, then we'll actually be able to pay it out. Well, it was a bet that didn't work out. It was a gamble that they lost. And look what we're at.
Yeah.
It's like our number one expenditure. One of our number one. It's like that Medicare, Medicaid, our number one.
And it's like, and I agree. It's like, yes, there are people who at this time need it because they are too old to suddenly change, and prepare. And I get that. And I'm happy to, I'm happy to pay for those people. I know it sounds terrible, but I'm happy because those are the people who have dedicated most of their lives to working and making this country what it was. And I'm okay with that. Yeah, I think it does need a major change because I'm not going to see a single dime out of it. Plus, I don't even pay into it because I actually have a pension. But, there's certain professions even that you're not going to have it. So it's like, why? I don't know. The Social Security one is tough because I understand the seniors need it. It does need a massive change. I kind of like your idea of some tax breaks so we do get that extra. But I think even with that comes, though, there has to be a point of, okay, once the person in, set a year. Okay, anyone who was born this year to this year will not, in any year after, will not receive any. You're still paying into it. You get those tax breaks, knowing that program will eventually go away.
I'd say it should be like if you're 50 years of age or older, then you still receive.
Yeah.
Anything younger than that, because at that point, if you're 49, you have like 15, because it's like 63 is when you can start. It's like, I think it's 63, 62 and a half, I don't know, something like that. Somewhere around that age, 63 is when you can start collecting it. And so the way I see it is that if you got over a decade, you got enough time to get your shit together. And so
hopefully,
like age 50.
I would say yes, but also with the economy right now, can you? I think there's lots of factors with that.
Yeah, well, like I said, there'd be other factors that would have to come into play, like the tax breaks and other stuff. But
yeah.
All right, I'm taking notes too of other things I want to make sure we break down by the
end.
Yeah,
me too.
NBC News Republican presidential debate. Once again, here's Salem Radio's Hugh Hewitt.
Thank you, Lester. When NBC News talks to voters, when I talk to voters every day, they all say that the border is a top issue. It can mean a lot of different things. It can mean 2 million people who crossed illegally last year. It can mean more than 150 arrests of people on the terror watch list. It can mean the burden on states from having migrants move into their states from the southwestern border. But I want to talk about opioids specifically and fentanyl. And I'll start with you, Senator Scott. Tens of thousands of Americans' families have suffered a death to fentanyl. Young people sometimes die taking one pill. What can you do as commander-in-chief on the first day to stop fentanyl and the waterfall of it into this country?
Well, number one, we should close our southern border. For $10 billion, we could close our southern border. For an additional $5 billion, we could use the currently available military technology to surveil our southern border to stop fentanyl from crossing our border. I've already led on legislation that would sanction the Mexican cartels. If you remember the path, the precursors come from China, then they are manufactured in Mexican labs, and then the Mexican cartels bring them across our border. By sanctioning their accounts and eliminating their cash, we starve them of what they need. Number one, closing our southern border makes it nearly impossible to get in. The military-grade technology is a backup, making sure that we not only stop 70,000 deaths in the last 12 months because of fentanyl, it also allows us to deal with the human trafficking travesty that is entering in our country in the same path. If we are going to deal effectively with 100,000 overdose deaths in our country and the 70,000 that is directly linked to fentanyl, we have to deal with our ports of entry and deal with our southern border. If we do that effectively, we have started reducing the challenge from the outside, and then we have to deal with the challenge on the inside, which seems to be connected to a mental health crisis that is spreading throughout our nation.
Governor Christie, Senator Scott just mentioned ports of entry. 90% of the fentanyl that is seized in the United States is seized at ports of entry. We don't know what's coming in across the open southern border. You've been a United States attorney. You've taken on cartels. Can it really be done quickly? What would you do as president?
It can be done quickly in two ways, Hugh, on fentanyl. The first way is exactly as you suggest, at ports of entry. We have to beef up what our law enforcement has in terms of technology. I would invest in that as president. We need to make sure that law enforcement has every tool at its disposal to do it. Secondly, on day one, I would sign an executive order that would send the National Guard to partner with Customs and Border Patrol, both at ports of entry and at the open ports of our border. Customs and Border Patrol agents are overwhelmed. There's 200,000 encounters a month over the last 11 months. We simply do not have the man and woman power at the border to be able to deal with it. And so dealing with both law enforcement, and you're right, we have done this, we can do this, but we got to give them the tools to do it, and technology is one of the biggest tools that we don't have enough of at the ports of entry. Now, we also need to lower demand, Hugh, in this country. And the way to lower demand is to start treating people again. You know, we started to do this before COVID, and we haven't done enough of it. And for every family out there tonight who has lost a loved one to fentanyl or to any other type of opioid overdose, what you know is all you want is a chance for them to win their lives back. When I'm president of the United States, we're going to call this what it is. It is a disease. like heart disease, diabetes, or any other disease like cancer that can be treated, should be treated. We not only have to stop supply, but we have to lower demand and save lives.
Thank you, Governor. Governor DeSantis, you have talked about using United States Special Forces to attack the cartels where they manufacture the chemicals that come from China. How often? How many? What does that look like?
Well, first, I was speaking to a dad who lost a son to fentanyl overdose. Son wasn't a drug addict. He had taken some pill that happened to be laced with fentanyl, and it was a fatal overdose. And when he told me, obviously the pain of losing a child is as bad as it gets, but he said what was salt in the wounds is that these elites in DC don't give a damn about what's going on in this country. They don't care that we have tens of thousands of opioid deaths, that the fentanyl's pouring in. They are not taking the type of action we need to. We're declaring it a national emergency on day one. I'm sending U.S. military to the border. I'm going to stop the invasion cold. I am going to deport people who came illegally. And I'm even going to build the border wall and have Mexico pay for it like Donald Trump promised. How are you going to do it? Yeah, Mexico's not going to fork over money. We're going to impose fees on the remittances that foreign workers send to foreign countries. We'll raise billions of dollars. I'll build the wall. But we are going to designate the cartels to be foreign terrorist organizations or something similar to that. And we're going to authorize the use of deadly force. We're going to have maritime operations to interdict precursor chemicals going into Mexico. But I'll tell you this, if someone in the drug cartels is sneaking fentanyl across the border when I'm president, that's going to be the last thing they do. We're going to shoot them stone cold dead.
I love that thing. I love that thing.
I'm okay.
My favorite.
Hey, Ronnie.
Ambassador Haley, if the United States uses special forces in Mexico without prior notice to the Mexican allies to our south, what would your colleagues at the United Nations think about that?
I don't care what my colleagues at the United Nations think. What I'll tell you is, first of all,
answer, honestly.
You have to go to the source.
I don't care about it.
We have lost more Americans in the Vietnam, Afghanistan, and Iraq wars combined. We lost 75,000 Americans last year. Go to the source. It is the reason why we'll continue to say we will end all normal trade relations with China until they stop murdering Americans. You watch how quick that flow stops. The second thing is we'll send special operations in to take out the cartels. We need to go to where they're distributing it, where the supply centers are, and take them out. We'll put 25,000 more Border Patrol and ICE agents on the ground and let them do their job. We will defund sanctuary cities. We will go back to the Remain in Mexico policy so that everybody stays in Mexico and they never get here in the first place. And instead of catch and deport, we'll go to catch and release. I'm sorry, instead of catch and release, we'll go to catch and deport. That is the way we'll deal with the border. Those are the things that we have to do going forward. But I do agree with Chris. One of the first things that we have to do is really focus on mental health and addiction centers. It is something that is needed in our country terribly because we don't deal with mental health, and someone who doesn't get care for mental health falls into addiction, and we owe it to them to treat it like the cancer that it is.
Mr. Ramaswamy, special forces in Mexico shoot them stone cold dead at the border?
One thing I just want to say and how we're talking about this issue is, like Ron, I've actually met many parents across this country who have lost their kids to laced pharmaceuticals that have fentanyl in them. The only thing I would ask, Ron, I think you'd be on the same page with me on this. Let's not even call that an overdose. Right. That is not an overdose. That is poisoning. If you put that fentanyl in a Big Mac, we would not call that an overdose. You'd call it what it is. It's closer to bioterrorism. And I say that because as it uniquely relates to this crisis, that does warrant more aggressive means to deal with it. So there's a new presidential election in Mexico in 2024. People may not be aware of that. It's going to be someone other than Obrador, who has been a disaster in Mexico. I think he's even mentioned me obliquely in speeches to say that somebody who would do this shouldn't get anywhere near the White House. Well, AMLO, get out of the way. There's going to be someone else in charge. I hope to build a good relationship with that next president of Mexico. We'll use our own military to seal our own southern border. What we need to do is stop using our military to protect somebody else's border halfway around the world when we're short right here at home. Get serious about protecting this border. And then the other thing that hasn't been discussed is the northern border. I'm the only candidate on the stage, as far as I'm aware, who has actually visited the northern border. There was enough fentanyl that was captured just on the northern border last year to kill 3 million Americans. So we got to just skate to where the puck is going, not just where the puck is. Don't just build the wall, build both walls. Can't just complete the wall, use the military to seal the Swiss cheese for the tunnels that they're actually building underneath that wall.
Thank you,
That's
Mr.
what needs to be
Ramaswamy.
practical and actually get this job done.
Thank you. Kristen.
Thank you, Hugh. Let's talk now about last night's election results. Abortion rights supporters saw victories in Ohio and Virginia following earlier wins in states like Kansas and Kentucky. Governor DeSantis, first to you, how do you see the path forward for Republicans on this issue?
Well, I stand for a culture of life, and I understand that it's important that everyone gets a shot. I'm reminded of a story about a young mother who was struggling in Jamaica about 45 years ago. She was counseled to not have a baby because she was poor, baby wouldn't have opportunity, and she came close to have an abortion, but she decided to have the baby, born poor in Jamaica. And the reason I know that story is because that baby girl ended up emigrating to the state of Florida, becoming a lawyer and a judge, and I appointed her to the Florida Supreme Court in August of 2022. We're better off when everybody counts. We're better off when we can promote a culture of life. At the same time, I understand that some of these states are doing it a little bit different. Texas is not going to do it the same as New Hampshire. Iowa's not necessarily going to do it the same as Virginia. So you got to work from the bottom up. You got to do a better job on these referenda. I think of all the stuff that's happened to the pro-life cause, they have been caught flat-footed on these referenda, and they have been losing the referenda. A lot of the people who are voting for the referenda are Republicans who would vote for a Republican candidate. So you got to understand how to do that. But let's just be clear. The Democrats have taken a position. They will not identify the point at which there should be any protection all the way up until birth. That is wrong, and we cannot stand for that.
All right, Governor DeSantis, thank you. Ambassador Haley, let me have you weigh in. Former President Trump has consistently blamed the abortion issue and how Republican candidates have talked about it for their electoral losses. How do you see the path forward?
You know, I've said it before. I think you have to be honest with the American people. This is a personal issue for every woman and every man. I am unapologetically pro-life, not because the Republican Party tells me to be, but because my husband, Michael, was adopted and I had trouble having both of my children. So I'm surrounded by blessings. Having said that, when you look post-Roe, a wrong was made right. They took it out of the hands of unelected justices and they put it in the hands of the people. And now we're seeing states vote. And what I'll tell you is, as much as I'm pro-life, I don't judge anyone for being pro-choice, and I don't want them to judge me for being pro-life. So when we're looking at this, there are some states that are going more on the pro-life side. I welcome that. There are some states that are going more on the pro-choice side. I wish that wasn't the case, but the people decided. But when it comes to the federal law, which is what's being debated here, be honest, it's going to take 60 Senate votes, a majority of the House, and a president to sign it. So no, we haven't had 60 Senate votes in over 100 years. We might have 45 pro-life senators. So no Republican president can ban abortions any more than a Democrat president can ban these state laws. So let's find consensus. Let's agree on how we can ban late-term abortions. Let's make sure we encourage adoptions and good quality adoptions. Let's make sure we make contraception accessible. Let's make sure that none of these state laws put a woman in jail or give her the death penalty for getting an abortion. Let's focus on how to save as many babies as we can and support as many moms as we can and stop the judgment. We don't need to divide America over this issue anymore.
Thank you, Ambassador. Senator Scott. Senator Scott, I'd like you to weigh in. How do you see the path forward? And what do you make of what Ambassador Haley just said? Do you see this as a consensus issue?
Well, I'm 100% pro-life. I have had 100% pro-life voting record. I would certainly, as President of the United States, have a 15-week national limit. I would not allow states like California, Illinois, or New York to have abortion up until the day of birth. I certainly wouldn't not allow for governors, former governor, Democratic governor of Virginia, who talked about infanticide. We need a 15-week federal limit. 3 out of 4 Americans agree with a 15-week limit. 47 out of 50 countries in Europe agree with a 15-week limit. I would challenge both Nikki and Ron to join me at a 15-week limit. It is in our nation's best interest. And frankly, I think it's unethical and immoral to allow for abortions up until the day of birth. We have an opportunity in this nation to stop that reckless behavior from states like California, New York, and Illinois. I'd go a step further. In my parents' plan, we start by talking about funding, block granting resources to crisis pregnancy centers. We should support adoption. There are a number of ways that we can say to the expectant mother that we stand with you. We should not only be pro-life before the child is born, we should be pro-life after the child is born just as much.
Senator Scott, thank you. Ambassador Haley, your name was invoked. Would you support a 15-week federal limit?
I would support anything that would pass because that's what would save more babies and support more moms. But you have to be honest with the American people. And I appreciate that Tim keeps calling me out for this. But Tim, there was a bill last year. Lindsey Graham sponsored it. You didn't even co-sponsor the bill. And then when you first were interviewed on this, when you ran, you wouldn't even say you were for 15 weeks. What I'm saying to the American people is, let's see what we can agree on. Let's bring people together and decide what we can agree on. I will sign anything where we can get 60 Senate votes, but don't make the American people think that you're going to push something on them when we don't even have the votes in the Senate. It's important that we're honest about that.
Let me go to Mr. Ramaswamy. Would you support a 15-week federal ban? And what is the path forward on this issue?
I just wanted to say, I mean, I think Nikki Haley did invoke being honest. And I just want to give credit to Tim Scott. He's honest about where he stood. And I think you should be honest, not making a political calculus, but to say, if a bill is served up, would you sign it? Here's my view on this. Speaking as a man, they say men have trouble speaking on this issue. I don't think we need to be that way. It was my home state of Ohio, I'm upset about this, yesterday, that passed a constitutional amendment that now effectively codifies a right to abortion all the way up to the time of birth without parental consent. Why? It's back to that Republican culture of losing. The Republicans did not have an alternative amendment or vision on the table. I know Ohio. I was born, raised, and I lived there. It's representative of the country. If in the state of Ohio, we talked about access to contraception, adoption, and also here's the missing ingredient in this movement: sexual responsibility for men. We live in an era of reliable genetic paternity tests that are 100% reliable. So we can say men deserve more responsibility. So we can tell women we're all in this together. It's not men's rights versus women's rights. It's about human rights. And I come back to that case that Clarence Thomas spoke of. A pregnant woman walking down the street, she's assaulted. The unborn child dies in that assault. You find me one person in this country who says that that criminal does not deserve liability for that death. You won't find one. That says we share the same instincts on this issue, but we require, I believe, a different generation of leadership
thank you.
to actually lead us forward and unite the country on this
Thank you.
Honesty.
Thank you, Mr. Ramaswamy. Governor Christie, as you know, federal limits are important to a lot of Republicans. Where do you stand on this issue, and what is the path forward for Republicans?
For 50 years, conservative lawyers have been arguing that the federal government should have absolutely nothing to do with this issue constitutionally because it's nowhere in the Constitution. And then Dobbs comes and we finally gain that victory, which was the creation of a constitutional right out of thin air that didn't exist. And now we have people running to say, let's short circuit the states from doing what they need to do, and let's go right to some type of federal ban at a certain number of weeks. And people on the stage have been all over the place: 20 weeks, 15 weeks, 12, 6. Look, the Frowners were really smart. And this is an issue that should be decided in each state. And I trust the people of this country, state by state, to make the call for themselves. Now, it's going to lead to a lot of divergence. In Oklahoma, you can't get an abortion unless the life of the mother is at risk. In my home state of New Jersey, it goes up to 9 months that you get an abortion. I find that morally reprehensible, but that is what the people of our state have voted for. And we should not short circuit that process until every state's people have the right to weigh in on it. But here's the bigger issue, Kirsten. The bigger issue is, and Tim began to touch on this, we're not pro-life for the whole life. To be pro-life for the whole life means that the life of a 16-year-old drug addict on the floor of the county lockup is precious, and we should get treatment for her to restore her life. The 52-year-old who's drug addicted should make sure that any of his children who he's passed that addiction on to are treated well too. Pro-life's not just in the womb, Kirsten. It's for the whole life.
All right, Governor, thank you. Candidates, thank you. We're going to take a final break, and when we come back, we'll hear from all of you with your closing statements. This is the NBC News Republican presidential debate. We'll be back right after this.
Okay, so I got some guests in the waiting room. I think I know I have at least one, Ryan, and I know we'll also have, I think Ty Smith will be joining me in a little bit, and Josh. But I'm going to wait to bring you guys on until the end because we are so close until the end. I just get so mad because I don't necessarily disagree with the idea of, okay, let's leave abortion as a states' rights issue and let the states decide. That's how the Constitution was written. I do agree with the quote from Christie that our founders were smart. However, when you have the other party, your opposition, that is actively trying to insert the federal government into that issue, you can't just be like, the federal government is not doing anything. Because we only control, and by a slim majority, we control the House by a slim majority. And even then, we have the fight between the Freedom Caucus and rhinos. And then everybody else in the middle. But so we have to take a stance at the federal level that is not, we don't have a stance. And it pisses me off that we still have people out there that are not realizing the political implications of it. If we lived in a perfect world, which we absolutely don't, we lived in a perfect world, then we could say, okay, it's a states' rights issue. That's what the Constitution says. But we don't live in a perfect world. We live in a world in which an entire wing of the country wants to, well, not the country, an entire wing of our political system wants to insert itself into every facet of life and expand government until it transcends itself. It becomes literally just it will be a part of every single part of your life if we do not stop it in some way. That's where I'm at with it. Josh?
Yeah, I mean, I like how Tim Scott even tried to say, okay, let's, because even Christie was like, we have some who are saying 20, some are saying 15, some are saying 6. Let's get a consensus. I like that Tim was like, can we agree right now? If we have to choose a consensus, 15, 3 and 4 Americans are in favor of it. If that's our number that we can agree on, at least have a consensus on that. Sure, let's do it. He tried to do that, and I'll give it that's better. But I do also just hate that, and this is less of a political thing. This is more of just a kind of personal thing. Is I have a personal issue with the idea of saying, or it's kind of political, but with the idea of saying, well, this is what the majority of people can get behind, because I do not necessarily believe that it is the government's role to do only what the majority of people, if the majority of people get behind, I agree.
Hey, let's legalize
Kev,
all drugs.
Hey, Kev, I agree. But you're saying we need a consensus. He offered a consensus. He offered a solution to your problem.
That's why I said I think it's better. I think it's better. But I still hate that the rationale behind it is this is what people can get behind.
But
I don't really care what people can
but
get behind.
I mean,
I believe in what's right.
But I understand that. But right now, we need a you just went on a huge rant in the beginning how we need a consensus. There's a consensus. There's at least a number. He said, can we all agree, get behind this?
Again, that's why I said I think it's better. That's why I do think it's better than what Christie said.
But now you're going to the ideal.
But I still have an issue with it. Why can't I have an issue with both? It's not mutually exclusive.
You can. I agree. We'll
I think everybody's awful. Everybody's terrible. Republicans, Democrats, they're all terrible. Let me.
You're just cranky.
I am cranky. I am the king.
Let me be the king. No.
Well, welcome back, everyone. With only 2 hours for a debate, we know there are other major issues that are important to Republican primary voters. I'll ask you each to please use your closing statement to focus on any topic you didn't have time to address and why you and not former President Trump would be the party's best choice to tackle these important issues. You each have a minute. Senator Scott, we'll start with you. 1 minute.
There's a crisis that is growing in our nation, and that crisis is cultural and spiritual. We need a renewal, a great awakening. We should reject the left's valueless, faithless, fatherless society. We should turn back to faith, patriotism, and individual responsibility. We should stop choosing victimhood and start choosing victory. We should stop kneeling in protest and start kneeling in prayer. There are basic truths that built this country. If you're able-bodied in America, you work. If you take out a loan, you pay it back. If you commit a violent crime, you go to jail. And if God made you a man, you play sports against men. I do not just want to. I do not just want to win the battle against Joe Biden. I want us together to win the war for our Christian conservative values that changed my life.
Senator Scott, thank you. Governor Christie, you have.
That's why I'm asking you for your vote.
Thank you for hosting tonight. Listen, it's a gift to be an American. And I'm running for president of the United States because I'm tired. I'm tired of seeing the division. I'm tired of seeing the anger. And I can see in the eyes of Americans their exhaustion. Their exhaustion from the petty personal politics that have taken over this country over the last number of years. I'm running for president to be a president of consequence, to do the big things, to make sure that America's role in the world stays number one, that we stand up for our friends and allies around the world, and we stand up for what we believe in right here at home. And it's not to eliminate our differences. Our differences has always been our strength as a country, not our weakness. But you can't truly say you love America unless you're ready to open up your heart to every American. I'm going to open up my heart to every American as president, and I will make sure that I return honesty, integrity to the Oval Office. We deserve and should accept nothing less.
Governor, thank you very much. Let's go to Mr. Ramaswamy now. Your 1 minute.
We've talked a lot about foreign wars tonight, but we're in the middle of a war right here at home. It's a war not between black and white or Democrat and Republican. It's between those of us who believe in our founding ideals and love this country and a fringe minority who hates the United States of America. And I think it's going to take a commander-in-chief to lead us to victory in that war, who first of all knows that we're in a war. Second of all, can't be captured by the special interests along the way. But third is from the next generation, somebody with fresh legs to lead us to victory. I'll shut down the deep state. I'll declare economic independence from China. I'll keep us out of World War III and then revive national pride in this country. I also want to close with one message to the Democrat Party. End this farce that Joe Biden is going to be your nominee. We know he's not even the president of the United States. He's a puppet for the managerial class. So have the guts to step up and be honest about who you're actually going to put up so we can have an honest debate. Biden should step aside, end his candidacy now, so we can see whether it's Newsom or Michelle Obama or whoever else.
All right,
just
Mr.
tell us the truth so we can have an honest debate.
Wow.
Ambassador.
I like that answer.
Ambassador Haley, you have 1 minute for your closing.
Thank you. The world is on fire. We have a war in Europe. We've got a war in the Middle East. We've got China on the march. It is very important that we know how to defend our freedoms and how to defeat terrorism and socialism. We have to know the difference between good and evil. We have to know the difference between right and wrong. We need to know that a strong America doesn't start wars. A strong America prevents wars. And the way we can focus on that is to make sure we go back to the soul of America and be strong and proud again. And we can't do that. We can't win the fights of the 21st century with politicians from the 20th century. We have to move forward. And we can do this. I know we can do this. So join our movement. Go to NikkiHaley.com and we will once again show what America that's strong and proud looks like. God bless.
Ambassador, thank you. Governor DeSantis, you're closing. You have 1 minute.
We must reverse our country's decline, and that is going to require leadership. I will take the hits. I will take the arrows. I will take the barbs, because it's not about me. It's about you. It's not about the past. It's about your future. We are going to fight for you. I am going to win for you and your family, and I'm going to lead this country's revival. As a veteran of the Iraq War and in the Navy, I will always put service above self as president. As the father of 3 young kids, I'm going to ensure that this country is left to the next generation in better shape than we found it. And as the governor of Florida, I delivered on all my promises. And you can trust me to deliver for you as the president of the United States. I am asking for your vote. I'll be a nominee that will be able to win the election. I will be a leader you can be proud of. And as your president, I will not let you down. God bless you.
Governor DeSantis, thank you. That is going to conclude our debate. The next line says, if the audience can hold their applause. That didn't work out. But anyway, for just a few more seconds, I'll ask you to just hold the applause. On behalf of my fellow moderators, I want to thank the candidates for their time and for this spirited debate. Really good, deep conversation, and we appreciate you all being here. Thank you as well to our wonderful hosts here at the Adrienne Arsh Performing Arts Center. On behalf of the Republican National Committee and all of us at NBC News, good night, everyone, from Miami.
Okie dokie. We can watch them shake hands. Look at that biggin right there. That's a big one. Christie, he's a big one. He's a big one, everybody. All right. Let's get to, Josh just decided to leave as we were about to start our commentary. Don't worry, everybody. I will make sure I get my good buddy in here, Ryan Mack of the Ryan Mack Show. How are you doing, bud?
I'm doing pretty good. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Anybody else, if you would like to join the stream into some commentary of this afterwards, I'm going to pull this back up real quick. I took you out.
No, you're good.
I was just looking at some people that were talking and doing some stuff. I'm working on I produce my own show here, so I have to, there we go. Okay, Josh will be back soon, everybody. But let's get into some commentary. I think Ty Smith, Modern Renaissance Man, should be joining soon. But Ryan, what are your, first off, introduce yourself to everybody, because you've never been on this platform of this show before. So introduce yourself to everybody a little bit.
I'm Ryan McKenzie. I'm host of the Ryan Mack Show. I have a podcast, not relatively well known. I used to be on Cities last year through the beginning of this year. I'm kind of new to live streaming. I'm still playing around with StreamYard and getting used to it, but I actually find it really easy.
Heck yeah, that's one of the best things about it. That's why I'm happy I was able to help get you into the space a little bit more. If you ever have any more questions or anything, of course, reach out. But tell me, what are your thoughts on what we just watched?
Well, I think what I shared your answers earlier about someone being too squishy on their principles. And as a conservative, if you're pro-life, you are unapologetically pro-life. You have to come up with your stance on when that life is determined. But that can be argued for a different day. Your principles are pro-life, and your principles are also standing up for women's rights. And when it comes to men competing in women's sports, that can also be something that you're hard on, in gay marriage. Sorry, but you're going to make a lot of people mad. You're not here to please everybody. You have to have a hard line in the sand on your principles. And some of these candidates on the stage don't. They're wishy-washy, like you said earlier.
Absolutely. Josh, what were your thoughts of the overall debate?
I mean, overall, I thought it was one of the better ones. I think there was a lot more substance, a lot less fighting, a lot of these stupid, petty insults. I mean, the Vivek had the one. But I mean, overall, I think they did cover a lot more substance, a lot less interrupting. It was one of the best substance-wise. I have to give them credit for that. I think they realized that that's what they need to start focusing on is substance.
Yeah, I'll give you that. There's a few things that I want to talk about, especially in that last hour. The first one is I want to talk about the TikTok ban. What are your guys' thoughts on the coverage of that and everything? I've got my own thought, but what do you think about the entire idea of banning TikTok, what the candidates had to say, just the overall reaction, not only to the debate, but the policy issue itself?
I don't have TikTok, so I don't really... I've tried it a couple times. I don't see a point in banning it, but unless you can actually prove that China is using it for spying purposes, then yeah, I think you shouldn't allow any kind of software that China is using to infiltrate our country. If you're going to sit there and hold a stance on a ban and then also have your entire household use the app, I think you should probably kind of check yourself a little bit.
Yeah, I think TikTok, I have TikTok, I use it from time to time. I mean, you can definitely get lost in it for hours. I'll admit.
Oh,
I
yeah.
have. You know,
Yeah.
I've woken up on a Saturday morning and went, oh, and I'm like, oh, it's been 3 hours. You know, it happens.
Yeah.
Which can be dangerous for sure. Yeah, I mean, I don't like the connections to China. The banning, I go back and forth on. I get what they're saying with, you know, they don't allow our apps. Why should we allow theirs? I guess my argument would be that makes us a better country. We do allow the free flow that they don't. I didn't necessarily like Vivek attacking Nikki like that, what he's saying about his daughter, because for a while, no one knew how dangerous this app was, potentially. And so if they do something before you know, can you really be held accountable for the danger without knowing the true danger? As soon as she found out, she said, hey, don't do it. You know, I guess that's my thing there. I also don't like the idea of bringing in their kids. Her kid's not involved with this.
I agree. That was kind of a cheap shot.
It's kind of shitty.
Yeah. He could have gone a different way there.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So my thing with the TikTok ban, I agree with that he probably shouldn't have gone after her daughter or anything like that. But everything that Vivek said after that, I 100% agreed with. He talked about, like, what about the fact that all of our other social media companies in America are data mining like a MFer, and then they go and sell that data to Chinese companies.
Yeah.
And here's the thing too, is so any company that's based in China is essentially controlled by the Chinese government. That's how
there's not many companies that
Right.
So when it comes to TikTok, the fact that it's owned by a Chinese company basically means it's owned by the Chinese government. And if you trust China enough that they're not using the info that they're gathering for some level of nefarious conduct, even if that's just collecting enough data so that they know the locations of Americans, the general idea of people's habits and things and such, so that if an attack were ever something they were interested in, they would have that level of data for potentially causing the most casualties, then I think it's safe to say that I understand a ban. I think that's one thing, though, that does very much worry me about all of that, is that the level of young, and I'm just going to say it, young, stupid people my age that are just dumb, that'll hear Republicans want to ban TikTok, and they're like, no, we gotta vote Democrat because we do TikTok. Like, that's exactly how they sound. And that's how they act too, because they're whiny little babies. But if you want to, because I guarantee you'll have some people, like some young Chad. Serious conversation. I'm going to bring you into real quick. This is another kid. He's been on with us before, Alex.
That's how we doing.
But serious thing. So I was out tabling for Turning Point USA on Illinois State University's quad like a month or two ago. So I'm tabling, and this kid comes up to me wearing literally worst like beard attempt ever. It was unkempt, had not had a haircut in a long time, definitely didn't own a brush or a comb or anything like that, wearing legitimately like flannel pajama pants and like a beaten up hoodie. And I'm like and he like is like, screw you guys. And I'm just like, oh, like, let's have a conversation. Serious thing he said. He goes, I cannot talk to you because if I get caught, then some of those liberal baddies might not sleep with me.
Wow.
Exactly. And those are the kind of people that will hear Republicans want to ban TikTok.
Those are the ones you
They'll
see in
be like,
Reels and TikTok.
Exactly. And so those are the kind of people, and I guarantee you, if he's well aware enough to know that a liberal baddie won't sleep with him if seen talking to me, then he's probably aware enough.
First off, what are you doing sleeping with a liberal? I mean, that's just your first mistake.
They're probably Taylor Swift fans too.
Easier to get in bed, I assume.
Yeah,
probably
easier.
Taylor Swift's a commie, and I stand behind that.
Oh yeah.
Alex, what do you think about the TikTok ban?
Oh man, I mean, give me 3 weeks ago, I was like, I could go be famous on TikTok just like everybody else. I've never had TikTok. I was close to it. I made an account for like 1 second, like 3 weeks ago, just because it seems all the good memes and political memes are on there. And then I was like, it's impossible to navigate this thing, even though, because I have one of those new Google Pixel 7A's or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's still like, I had no clue how to use it. I never caught onto the trend for it. And I get all my stuff through Instagram and Facebook and then occasional Twitter. So It works just as well. TikToks if you are just young and stupid and like dancing.
I will say TikTok has made my job a lot harder because the amount of kids who come in and say something like, "Oh, I heard this on TikTok," and I'm like, "Okay,
must be true."
Who said it? I don't know, some kid. Cool.
Yeah. Personally, it makes the military look like a joke too, because like people they're supposed to be out recruiting people and personalizing, and they're like, "Hey, I can do stuff with my hands."
Yeah, exactly. I'm like I mean, like
I can do stuff with my hands too. So
I had a kid come in who was like, I heard, women are going to be drafted. I heard it on TikTok. I'm like, no, that's not true.
Hopefully. No, I'm kidding. Okay, well, the next thing I wanted to get into, because that's the TikTok ban, was so Vivek Ramaswamy was on attack mode tonight, heavily against Nikki Haley. And I want to talk about that one, but I want to talk about this one first. It's going viral on Twitter. I got the clip pulled up. And so everybody take a look, take a listen, recap. This attack that seems to have a lot of Republicans united. But I'm curious your guys' thoughts. Let's take a look and a listen.
Swami, let me turn to you. Please make your case. Why should you be the nominee and not the former president?
I think there's something deeper going on in the Republican Party here, and I am upset about what happened last night. We've become a party of losers at the end of the day. It was a cancer to the Republican establishment. Let's speak the truth. I mean, since Ronna McDaniel took over as chairwoman of the RNC in 2017, we have lost 2018, 2020, 2022, no red wave that never came. We got trounced last night in 2023. And I think that we have to have accountability in our party. For that matter, Ron, if you want to come on stage tonight, you want to look the GOP voters in the eye and tell them you resign, I will yield my time to you. And frankly, look, the people there cheering for losing in the Republican Party. Think about who's moderating this debate. This should be Tucker Carlson, Joe Rogan, and Elon Musk. We'd have 10 times the viewership, asking questions that GOP primary voters actually care about and bringing more people into our party. You think the Democrats, and we've got Kristen Welker here, do you think the Democrats would actually hire Greg Gutfeld to host a Democratic debate? They wouldn't do it. And so the fact of the matter is, I mean, Kristen, I'm going to use this time because this is actually about you in the media and the corrupt media establishment. Ask you, the Trump-Russia collusion hoax that you pushed on this network for years, was that real or was that Hillary Clinton made up disinformation? Answer the question. Go.
Mr. Ron.
Sorry. This is how we get our country back. We need accountability because this media rigged the 2016 election. They rigged the 2020 election with the Hunter Biden laptop story. And they're going to rig this election.
Your time is up.
Accountability.
Let me turn to Governor Christie. Why you, Swami?
So, thoughts? Firing.
So I did make a note. I said Vivek is like a chihuahua. He's just angry and fighting everyone because he's small. And he reminded me of just a chihuahua, just like freaking out of everything. Like, dude, calm down. I mean, I will say, he was definitely on the attack. He was definitely on the attack. I mean, I think he's right. I think calling out Ronna McDaniel is smart. I'll take it a step further. When Ronna McDaniel had a opponent not long ago. Mm-hmm. Donald Trump endorsed Ronna McDaniel. Yep. Donald Trump endorsed Ronna McDaniel. Said she's doing great things. He's been very kind to her. She's been very kind to him. She has helped him out a lot. He helped keep her in charge. This loss in Ronna McDaniel being the terrible, terrible RNC chair that she is on him as well because he helped empower her.
Okay.
So I'll take it there.
Other thoughts?
I think he was spot on attacking the media. I think he was bold enough to attack them right on the national audience during the debate. I mean, no one else has been able to do that. No one else is going to call out right to her face. It was your fault why the narrative was pushed. So I think I like that boldness. Was it genuine of him? I don't know. I mean, I still don't know much about him. But I applaud him for at least going there.
Yeah, that's really where I was at with a lot of it. And Alex, I'd love to get your take as well. But I appreciated the RNC call out. I have issues with the RNC. I think it's highly ironic that the debate is being hosted by the RNC. A main person that obviously puts it on is Ronna McDaniel, and then he's just like, "Screw you!" right to the camera, and then he goes after the other people that are putting on the debate, NBC and their host. And he's just like, "Screw you too," and I love that. I'm just like, because because that's the way that it's been seen and the way that it's been framed. And like you have like Christie, who at the end of the debate was like, "Thank you guys for hosting this. Thanks for everybody for hosting this." Like the way I see it is like, I guess thank him for hosting it, but just as Vivek said, like it's just because that's the way it's been done that they are. That's why it's being done. I agree with him that Tucker Carlson, Elon Musk, and Joe Rogan would be much more interesting and better moderators that would probably not only push for a lot higher viewership, but also ask questions. Maybe some are the same or similar, but overall would get to the heart of certain issues that genuine Americans are feeling. Why is Joe Rogan the most listened to podcast in the world? It's because he talks about things not only that are of interest, but also shares opinions that a lot of people connect with and talks about things in a way that people connect with. And so he knows how to connect to people. Do you think that whatever Lester Holt, who has been on TV since before I was born, do you think he actually knows what the average American is going through other than the polls he reads and what his staffers tell him? No, he doesn't. Do I really think Joe Rogan knows everything that an average person goes through, considering his fame and fortune for a long time? No, but he's shown that he connects with people a lot better than Lester flippin' Holt. So, loved the attacks. Alex, thoughts?
I just think he plays to Vivek himself. I mean, I know he's on attack mode. A lot of his points were really good, but I think that tonight was mostly because he's fallen behind. And because between the last debate and this debate, there was like talk about him for like a week or so, and then he just disappeared. And then all of a sudden the debate came up and it was like, oh, I'm relevant again. And so those attacks that we were seeing is because he was behind. And that's why he pulled the Trump card and attacked the media and everything, is because he's not original. And a lot of his points were really, really good.
Yeah.
They're really, really good about the Republican National Convention, because Ronna McDaniel, she's been in almost as long as Trump was in, but she's, if I remember correctly, she's moderate from New York. And so she wasn't really a good pick in the first place.
I think the reason why she was considered to be a good pick from the inside baseball I understand is that she's very well connected with heavy donor bases.
Yeah. And I understand that.
From a party standpoint, it makes sense that you pick somebody who's going to bring in a lot of money.
Right.
Yeah. But the thing is that the donors don't get you votes, though. So, I mean, it gets you campaign money and everything, but they're not.
You're right in directness. Like directly, the donors don't necessarily get you, but in the facts that then you can, if you're smart about the money that you receive, then you can pay for more ad time and more workers, and you could pay for more that will likely or hopefully yield votes. So you're right, but there's that. I want to talk a little bit more about, so Vivek went on the attack, not only against the RNC, the media, but seemed to be heavily attacking Nikki Haley, which was a little bit of a surprise for me. Not super big, but I expected him to be going after Haley and DeSantis. And while he had a few gripes or jips at DeSantis, there's a lot more against Haley. What are your guys' thoughts?
I mean, I think so. I mean, those two have not gotten along since the first debate. That first debate, she embarrassed him a little bit. She kind of scolded him on national television. And I think he holds a gripe against that. They have never gotten along. Those two have always gone at each other. I agree. I thought he was going to go after DeSantis a lot harder, but it seemed like he was even like, no, I think even we agree on some things. I think I think Governor DeSantis and me would agree on this, which I think was smart. I think Vivek is trying to, I think he sees the writing on the wall. This is a two-man race. It's a Trump versus DeSantis race. He knows that. Mm-hmm. So he's trying to stay in both of their good graces right now, because he's trying to get some sort of cabinet position or some sort of secretary or, staffer. He's trying to get something, which I don't blame him for doing. I mean, I get, and I think even saying, Ron, we agree on this, but we disagree on this, is showing, look, I'm objectionable too. I can be a good voice and share my real opinion, But yeah, I mean, him and Haley have always hated each other. I don't know what it is.
I think it's Haley and him have completely different views on almost every level. even if he's not completely conservative on most things, she is out there in left field and as part of the establishment. She may be conservative on some views that she's held, but he's attacked her differently because of things that she's flat on. And rightly so. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, honestly, I was expecting, because tonight I expected DeSantis to attack Nikki Haley a lot more, because right now the race is mostly between them. We saw that tonight. But honestly, because Vivek was so on it and so just attacking everything, that DeSantis really didn't have to do anything except for let Vivek roast her, until DeSantis had to call her out on her BS China claims and saying, "Oh, he's letting China into Florida too." It's like he wrote that down. He's going to fact check that and use it in his attack campaign.
Well,
straight up.
And a couple people, real quick, on Twitter, I saw they said every time Nikki attacked, she sounded unprofessional.
Yeah, because she has nothing against him. His DeSantis' track record is clean.
Right, but I mean, I would think Vivek sounded a little unprofessional in the same way too. But they said, so I think it was smart to let her do the attacking. Ron did the responding.
Well,
and he come in as a calm guy.
Yeah, that's one thing I was going to get at. First off,
laughing at it too.
Not as many people are going to talk about Vivek sounding unprofessional, because that's like not if sounding smart is his thing, or at least attempting to sound smart is his thing, but sounding professional isn't necessarily. Nikki Haley, however, being the former UN ambassador and also the brand she's portrayed has been be professional. And so when she goes against that, that's definitely going to be attacked more. When it comes to the Vivek and Haley attacks, my belief is that he went after her, not only because I think a little bit of what Ryan said is that she has a lot more, they're diametrically opposed, especially on the foreign policy issues, but on a lot of other things as well. But I also thought it was much more because she has risen in the polls and taken kind of his spot. And so I think that there's a lot of gripe there as well. What Alex was saying a little bit that I think was amazing is, and Josh a little bit as well, is that Vivek was going after Haley all the time. DeSantis never had to. And building off what Josh was saying as well, is that DeSantis was never throwing the first punch, which just made him look even better. It was like, I'll defend my record.
Right.
But I don't need to go after you because my record speaks for itself. I speak for everything I've done speaks for itself, which I think was just a very classy move politically, but also just made him look better, a lot better. And so now Haley has all the bad juju on her, but essentially DeSantis is left clean.
DeSantis, I know I sent you a couple tweets. I saw DeSantis, the DeSantis War Room did tweet a picture of Nikki and her shirt says "Frack the Everglades," and then someone else made.
What?
He made like she has a fake shirt. It says "Frack the Everglades." I sent it to you on Twitter, and then someone else made one. It's Nikki Haley, like the black and white, and it just says "Fuck the Everglades" over it. And I thought that was very funny. So I think that's smart that they're kind of letting the social media aspect take care of that. He's going to be professional on the stage. Let social media take care of it. That's their job, is to do that. You know.
Yeah, I'm trying to find this T-shirt.
I sent it to you.
Okay,
on Twitter.
Oh yeah, I don't have my Twitter logged in on this computer. I just use whatever I got. But okay, interesting. We kind of talked about abortion a little bit already. Josh and I did. I went on my rant. Ryan, Alex, anything you'd like to add about that topic at all? I know Ryan talked about it a little bit in terms of just being wishy-washy, and I think that's where we find the wishy-washy, no backbone Republicans. I think that's that's one of the big issues.
What came into play in 2020 midterms and now with last night, it's the messaging. There weren't enough conservative candidates that were strong in their stance on the ballot saying, this is the way it is. This is what I believe. You take it or leave it. And that's why I think most voters want to see, even if they disagree with you, they want to know where you stand in a hard line. And so many Republican candidates were like, well, they stepped on the toes of some of the independent women and just in general, because they were so mad at Roe v. Wade being overturned. I think you have to still be unapologetically stuck in the mud with your stance. And that's what they're not doing. They're too weak. Well, what about this? Well, what about if they're falling down drunk and they had, too many to drink and they forgot to take their Plan B pill? Well, that you're talking about the rarest of rare circumstances in which you're wanting to have abortions be unabolished. So I mean, it makes no sense.
Alex?
I agree completely with what Ryan said. I think that they could have done more to touch on what happened last night, sort of bouncing off between the Republican establishment base and what Trump failed to do in 2020. I mean, even though they overturned Roe v. Wade and abortion is now up to the states and everything, technically, but then you had Ohio go through and legalize it last night. They should have spent some time talking a little more about that and how important that was and how they would fix that and move forward going into 2024.
Right. You overturned it and then had no plan for how the left would attack that.
And that's kind of, and I think that's kind of what I was trying to get at with Kev earlier too, was, Kev said we need a consensus. I agree. Let's have, if we want to have a consensus, have a consensus. Tim Scott said that, hey, can we all agree 15 weeks? But can we just make that consensus here? That's it. That's what, 3/4 Americans agree with. I agree.
Glenn Youngkin's doing too.
Right. I agree. In an ideal world, they wouldn't have to happen. We don't live in an ideal world.
Yep.
So let's set a hard line that's comparable, that people can get behind, because it is an emotional issue. It's an issue that, I have students who are female who hear Nikki talk about abortion and they love the stance because it's an emotional issue for them. So until we can find a way to alter the society to say, hey, there's other viable options, while there is this massive propaganda, campaign happening, we do need a consensus. And if that's the consensus we can find, we have to say it. I agree, Kev. Majority doesn't always mean the best. If 90% of people agree that we should kill Kevin Phares, doesn't mean it's a good idea. But if on an issue like this, if that's the consensus we can get, we got to just run with it and work and build up a plan later to keep going.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like, I wouldn't have a problem if everybody came out and said 15 weeks, that's what we're standing with the Republican Party. And if you're against 15 weeks, you're not a Republican. I'd be perfectly, or if you're not for 15 weeks and you're not a Republican, you're not running as on a Republican ticket. I'd be for that messaging. Like, I'd have my own personal asterisk that's just like, okay, that's a good start. But we can't just be legislating based on what everybody wants, because that's why, like, I hate the idea of pure democracy. And I think pure democracy is idiotic, just as our framers thought as well. Pure democracy is idiotic because then you have mob rule, and then you can have just decisions made that aren't the right decision, but they're the decision that everybody agreed on. And so again, like,
I agree.
If everybody agrees on something, it doesn't mean it's the right thing. It just means everybody agreed on it. So those were my main things I wanted to come up with and talk when it comes to the debate. But I always want to ask the question to everybody: who do you think won?
I think Ron did, just by not getting on the offensive when he didn't have to be. He could have taken a few more shots at Nikki, but he didn't have to. And I think that doing that, he won tonight in his calm approach. He didn't have to say anything. He let his record speak for himself. They tried to attack him, and he had a response. I think Vivek fired all night, but I don't think he hit anything all that well.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that when I was talking to my students about this, I kept saying, hey, watch tonight's debate. I think it's going to be interesting. I said, because we're in Florida, Ron's got home field advantage. And you can tell he did. He felt more comfortable. He is saying, hey, you want to see what my policies do? Go walk outside. And I think that's such a power that he had there, having that be in Florida. I think he absolutely won. Yeah, he didn't attack if he didn't need to. He defended his record. He put the slings. He shot the arrows when he needed to at Nikki or Trump. Yeah. And I like that he didn't even. He kind of really didn't acknowledge Vivek, Christie, and Scott. They weren't there. This was him, Nikki, and Trump. And I think that was the smartest move he could have done, because he knows it's them three.
Yeah.
Is that everybody?
Yep, I pretty much agree with that. I mean, Ron, I think he won too. I mean, the sleeper money was either on Haley, and then Tim Scott, even though he didn't really do a whole lot, but he
He's
proved
very
his points.
faith-based tonight.
Well, and he is who he is, and he's going to be very calm in his approach, and he's very, I don't know, just he's well spoken and he's quiet. He's not going to be a rah leader, but he's very.
the Bible too.
Yeah, I like him a lot. I don't think he's ready in this moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say Christie. I think Christie lost. I think Christie made me most upset.
Yeah, well, because he didn't even get any of his like good lines in or anything. Like at least in the other ones, like while I wouldn't agree with him, he had the Donald Duck one.
Donald Duck, right?
He had the AI candidate one in the first one. Like he didn't even have any of that. He was
tired. That's what he said. He was tired.
Boring.
Tired of eating.
Boring.
He ran for president.
Yeah. I was just bored. Like I said, I went on that whole rant, and he was like, "Oh, last time we ignored a guy like that, it was World War II." I'm like, Putin is not Hitler. Can we stop comparing those two? Like, Putin lacks the charisma.
Mm-hmm.
Like, let's be real here. Putin is not a threat. I don't think. I mean, to be fair, I don't think Xi Jinping's a huge threat.
Also, the military.
Yeah, exactly.
Military.
All right, so I wanted to get because I was trying to see if there was anything of substance coming out of the Trump rally that was happening not too far from Miami in whatever that city was in Florida. And I'm getting conflicting messages. I couldn't really find anything of substance during a speech like that he said anything that was
and there may have
particular
been
interest, at least in the social media gatherings right now that I'm looking at. There was some there's been conflicting narratives in terms of the size of the crowd. I'm seeing some on Twitter that are posting massive crowds and everything. I've also seen others that are showing nearer to the end of the speech, or at least later on in the speech. I don't know if it's necessarily the end, but later on in the speech, the crowd being much emptier. What do you guys think about Trump's current place in the GOP primary? The current polls, is it encouraging, discouraging? What do you think about his candidacy?
I've been saying it for a while now. I think the polls are made up. I don't trust polling. I think the media has a vested interest in Trump being president, or at least being the candidate. Because they know how to beat him. They know if he does happen to become president, they got 4 more years of really good ratings and a lot of money.
Yeah.
They got a vested interest in making that guy look good.
Right.
Yeah, I saw a lot of reports, people saying people were leaving the stage, and someone said you can only hear the same speech and the same content so many times before you get tired. And when in Trump, I can predict the Trump speech right now. He's going to come out, say this is a beautiful crowd, say I'm being persecuted, I'm being politically persecuted. I won 2020. You should vote me because I'll save the country. It's the same speech over and over. He's not having the zingers the way he used to. He's not coming out and saying outlandish things like a 2016 or even 2020. He's sticking to the same message. And I do think that has to do with partially because he has these legal cases. He knows he's being watched. He knows he's got to be careful. I think, I know Kev DPB talked about that in his show. I'm going to give the opposite of DPB. I think Trump's best move is drop out, just focus his money on these legal campaigns. I will donate to a Trump legal defense fund. I'm not going to donate to the Trump campaign though. That's just me. I think his best bet is to hope another Republican wins to pardon him, because I just don't think he can do it.
Well, I think that's a losing strategy. I know that.
Well, his strategy since 2016 hasn't won. So
let Ryan talk.
Well, okay. So I don't agree with everything he has said since he has won the first time, and he says a lot of stupid things. And even I voted for him both times, and I'll vote for him again. But I even will say, just shut your mouth. When your policies worked the first time, when you open your mouth and say stupid things happen. I don't trust the polls either. I mean, look, 2016, Hillary was up 99% chance of winning, and he smoked her in the end. So polls are kind of a large margin. So I think it's actually probably closer than they appear now. But I still think this is Trump's party. I think Ron's campaign has not done a good enough job to make it appear closer than it is. He's kind of been quieter than I thought he would have been. I think for Trump to attack his what he's done in Florida was stupid, because for a while there he was railing on him and saying how good of a job he was doing in Florida, before he was running. So when Trump gets backed into a corner by somebody that's a threat, he's going to come out swinging and attack him, even though if it didn't make sense. And that's part of the primary season. It's going to be ugly. Ted Cruz was a very much a hated man by Trump, and so was a lot of other Republicans who ran against him the first time, and they became hardcore allies of his during his presidency. So I think you have to be careful when you take the primary season into account and actually look at their substance and their records. And I think 2016 Trump needs to appear in order to give him a real stronger chance. I still think a bag of donuts could beat Biden at this point.
Yeah, one thing I want to talk about with that though is because, like, yes, so Ted Cruz was not a Trump ally in the 2016 election until obviously after Trump had won.
Right.
But
and Cruz was my first guy before Trump was the nominee.
that's where I was at. That's where I was at too. But that's the point that I have here is that in 2023 going into 2024, Trump it's undeniable that Trump has a significant and loyal following of those that do. It is a good portion of likely Republican voters, and many of them are fiercely loyal. In fact, I have one commenter here that says, if I can't vote for Trump, I won't vote. I know people like that. I disagree with that standpoint.
Yeah.
But I know people like that. And okay, if that's how you feel. In 2016, when Trump said, screw you, Ted. Ted's dumb. Ted's a rhino, whatever he would say.
Yeah.
Whatever he would attack him on.
His dad killed JFK.
Like, whatever. Yeah. So whatever he would say then, he didn't have the same significant and loyal following to where it made such an impact to where people vehemently hated the opponent, like what happens now. Like now, Trump, because of his significant following, you have people that some of which I know that will make blatantly just like dumb and false claims about Ron DeSantis. Look, if you don't like Ron DeSantis, there I'm sure there can be a logical reason to not like him or to not trust him, whatever. I know that there's some questions about his funding and things like that. Okay. But based on his record, and even in his record after starting his run for president, the things that he has done to try to help Floridians through the Israeli-Palestine conflict, flying people back and among a lot of other things, to call him a rhino simply because Trump said so is false.
Yeah.
And so the problem that I'm having is now, again, Trump did amazing things for this country. I'm not going to deny that. But I don't even think that Trump realizes the power of his voice and, using your words, Ryan, the stupid things that he says and the consequences they will have. Because even if Ron DeSantis was well poised before he ran for president to be a Republican leader for basically the rest of his life.
Just on his record and what he's done alone. Yeah.
Well poised. And if these polls are right, which again, I take them with a grain of salt, but if these polls are right and Trump actually has 50, 60, 70% of the Republican Party behind him, and you have a good portion of that also for some reason believes Ron DeSantis is a rhino, well, then we could have potentially lost somebody who was in no way a rhino, but then you'll have people that are 100% behind that stance, are 100% behind that stance because Trump said it.
I think you have to look at
And I don't think after 2024 that's going to change. I don't even think if he comes back and is like, "Oh, guys, no, never mind. I was kidding. It was just a campaign." I don't think that's going to change their minds. You're going to have people that get stuck in that mindset.
Right. I think you have to understand what Trump's personality is. You hit him, he's going to hit back. And when he's backed in the corner, when DeSantis was truly a threat early on, he was scared that he was going to lose the primary to DeSantis by a lot. So what does he do? Come out swinging. Now, a lot of his criminality, his criminal cases against him have emboldened him too, because the country is tired of having a presidential candidate thrown into the fire every chance he got over the dumbest things. He's 91 counts against him. They'll indict him for a ham sandwich right now. Bongino had it best. He lives in Florida. He's a DeSantis guy. He's a good supporter, but he's also Trump. He'll vote for Trump. He's not an anti-DeSantis guy. He's just a Trump guy. Trump is right for the right time right now. But we need more people like that. If you can be a Trump supporter and a voter, but also if something happens, vote for the next best candidate to take on the left. And that's where I would be. I'm a Trump supporter through and through, but if he's not the candidate, it's going to be whoever can take down the left. It has to be. You can't have a mindset, well, it's Trump or nothing. That's a losing strategy also every time.
Alex, thoughts?
Honestly, I'd see Trump, and I mean he dropped off a little bit since earlier this fall. once things started getting more towards the debate, I feel like he got quiet. I mean, I guess it was more in the face of his recent legal battles and what's going on with the judge that's sitting over his current case, I think in Georgia, and then some of them. But I see him as a double-edged sword.
He had all the civil fraud stuff in New York in the last week. Both of his sons had to testify, and then he himself had to testify.
That too. And so I see him as a double-edged sword, where he's not the same person as he was in 2020. I feel like 2020 changed him. And that's part of the reason that a lot of the people that are now running in the primary are a little more successful than they had. Because from what I'm hearing, the polls are still have Trump up quite a bit over DeSantis. And even with the Kim Reynolds endorsement, which came in the last couple of days, you might see DeSantis jump a little bit, but I'd take them with a grain of salt as well because they're the polls. But I feel like the polls have not changed at all for Trump. And so Trump himself has compromised his policies a lot. And a lot of the people that he endorsed as well, we saw that they did not do well in their elections. He endorsed the guy for Kentucky, and he didn't win. I don't even think Trump even really went to Kentucky. He should have gone to Kentucky and should have shown his face. But of course, I don't need to. I need to fight all these legal battles and all this stuff. And so he just sort of brushed it under the rug. He endorsed all these people 10 months ago, but he did nothing for them recently, and so they lost. And then he goes right back out and attacks them and says, it's on your fault that you guys lost.
Yeah, I was going to add that because I just saw this earlier. So back in November 4th of this year, Trump on Truth said, Daniel Cameron of Kentucky has made a huge surge now that they see my strong endorsement and the fact that he's not really a McConnell guy. They only try to label him that because he comes from the great state of Kentucky. So he's talking about how he's not a McConnell guy. Today, November 8th, Daniel Cameron lost because he couldn't alleviate the stench of Mitch McConnell. So he's throwing even his people he's backing and endorsing under the bus because they lost all this. It's like he tries to alleviate him. He tries to separate himself. And I think that's an issue.
Yeah.
It's a huge issue.
It definitely doesn't look good. Ryan, you said that you're more of a Trump guy. You're obviously open to other candidates if Trump is not the nominee. What are your thoughts on that kind of the backtracking and stuff like that?
I'm kind of like the same opinion. I think Dan has said it a couple times on his show. Endorsements, I don't really think endorsements hit that much of a weight. I know it may seem like on the surface when he endorses all these candidates across the country, but at the end of the day, they're their own candidates. If they want to win these elections, they have to put in the work. You can be endorsed by Trump or Santa Claus or Elvis Presley. And at the end of the day, it's your job to get your votes. And
it's funny that you say Elvis Presley because I think I forgot
because of his second cousin was a Democrat. Which I don't know if Elvis was going to be a Democrat or Republican. Who cares? But
he was definitely more of a 60s Democrat.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, I don't think endorsements weigh as much as they probably should, given maybe if Ron DeSantis endorsed because of his record, maybe that would weigh heavily on some of the state candidates. Mm-hmm. But Trump has his name, and that's what he thinks is going to win.
And I want to build on that because I agree. I think we've talked about this on the show a lot, but candidate quality matters.
Right.
And we're losing that.
Right.
Daniel Cameron, for the last couple weeks, has been running ads saying, I'm Trump endorsed. I'm Trump endorsed. Look, I'm a Trump endorsed guy. Look at me. I'm Trump endorsed. Look at me. That's all he was saying.
Well, it's no different than McConnell or Lindsey Graham or some of these other high-powered rhinos that are endorsing candidates that fail also. So it's a whole party issue with candidates, and it's never going to be solved.
It's like it's okay to say, "Hey, I'm Trump endorsed," but here's all my backing. He believes in me because of what? Because of X, Y, Z.
Because of the record, because of my voting record, because of my history. Yeah, you can. Yeah, that's absolutely
interesting. One thing I want to talk about, or I want to bring up, we are getting kind of close to when I want to wrap this up, but one thing that was brought up at the very beginning of the show by myself, Alex kind of brought it up a little bit as well, is so Kim Reynolds, the governor of Iowa, endorsed Ron DeSantis. Many DeSantis supporters that I've talked to have said things like, wait till Iowa, wait till Iowa, wait till Iowa. And that's going to prove Ron and everything like that. Well, one thing that I find interesting in everything that I've seen, to be a devil's advocate, is that Iowa has not predicted a Republican presidential candidate since George W. Bush in 2000. 2008, McCain was not it. Didn't win Iowa. 2012, Romney didn't win Iowa. 2016, Trump didn't win Iowa. What makes you so confident that Iowa is going to be it? I know Josh has said, I don't know if you've ever said it, Alex, but I know Josh has said,
yeah, for sure.
Wait till Iowa.
So I think that's a very excellent point, and I would agree. Iowa doesn't mean you'll win. And that's why I've said I think we need to combine Iowa and New Hampshire. If one candidate that's not Trump can win both of those, that shows that there's another powerhouse. There's another head coming in. That's why he's rallying so hard in Iowa, because that's the starter. Some people, because I do think there are some
New Hampshire actually has the first primary in the United States.
Right. Iowa's a caucus, and then So what I think what's going to happen is I think there's a couple people who they like Trump. He has the biggest name. DeSantis, I would agree with Ryan. I think at times the DeSantis campaign has been quiet. They got to get him out there. They've been focusing on that more. I think they've been doing a little better with that. But I think what's going to happen is, hey, DeSantis wins Iowa. They go, oh, hey, I've heard that name before. I've seen him on debates. Wow, he beat Trump in Iowa? Who is this guy? Then they dig a little deeper. Within that last couple of weeks, they go, okay, you know what? I like Trump's policies. I don't like it, because that's the biggest thing I was here. I don't like his mouth. I don't like his age. Those are the two. His mouth and his age. Here's a younger guy. He has a good record. Let's throw my hat towards the ring. Is it going to sway everyone? Hell no. Of course, like you said, there's that loyal following. But I do think there'd be more people who'd be willing to say, I'm going to give this guy the chance the same way I gave Trump the chance in 2016. I'm going to give the guy the chance.
So you think it could create a bandwagon effect? If he wins both Iowa and New Hampshire. So now your thing is not just wait till Iowa.
I think Iowa.
Look at Iowa and New Hampshire.
I think Iowa will create a bandwagon, which will then help in New Hampshire, which will then create a bandwagon throughout the rest of the country.
I think, but the problem with that is that DeSantis is not like 2016 Trump. He's kind of well known, and they've seen what he's done in Florida. They like what he's done in Florida, but they've seen what his campaign has been, and I don't think there's going to be enough support there to carry him over to the primary. He'll get some key states, but I don't think he's going to get that first outright push necessarily.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's going to.
Anything can happen.
Right. Well, right. Exactly. So we can't predict this at all. I don't know. I think people want. I do think there's a big majority of people who want another viable option, but are afraid that there may not be. And so by just winning one of those states and then winning both,
right?
Hey, he is the viable option. Maybe we can do this. It's completely conjecture and theory. Of course, I have no way to predict.
Well, Biden won the presidency with only barely winning South Carolina, and he was
exactly.
So it's fine.
Exactly. I just think it's the way to say, you know what? People are gonna say there is another chance. There is another guy out there who knows how to shut his mouth and who's younger, and that's gonna be the thing.
I got you.
Another
Alex,
interesting. Another interesting thing to notice. Speaking of New Hampshire, I was talking to a couple friends of mine, some people that are associated with some of the different things that are going on. And interesting enough, from what I've heard, is that Christie is polling very well in New Hampshire.
Mm-hmm.
So which is very, very surprising. And then
kind of, I mean, it's right by New Jersey, and that's where he's from.
Yeah. So there's little home field advantage there.
Yeah.
And that's what I thought too. But the other thing that's noted is that the last 2 weeks or so combined, Nikki Haley and the Trump campaign have spent almost, I think probably more, but just about $5 million combined in attack ads on DeSantis. Because initially the Trump campaign thought, hey, Iowa is going to be a lot closer than it was. And then Kim Reynolds said, hey, we're endorsing DeSantis. And so they sort of panicked. So they spent, what was it the other day? The number was $1.5 million
Yeah, I think he spent
paid
2
ads.
I think he spent 2.4 total so far.
Yeah, and they've been attack ads, and so they're pushing those through Iowa right now too, and yeah, so we'll see if tonight changed anything as well for Nikki Haley, but I don't know. It's another thing that's noting for me is that DeSantis is also. He has an interesting face when he ends his comments as well. When I don't know if anybody else saw that.
Yeah, he does. I always see
and then
Twitter.
like,
Twitter tends to blow up with, especially MAGA Twitter will blow up with that.
Yeah.
Afterwards. But any final
Yeah.
thoughts for the crowd, everybody? It's getting close to 10 o'clock here, and I have food to eat, sleep to have, and a run to do tomorrow morning. Any final thoughts?
I'm good.
Yeah,
No?
I guess
Everybody keep an open mind. That would be my main one. Josh, Ryan, Alex, thank you for joining us. Josh, thank you for always being a wonderful and lovely enough co-host to join me on these when you can. I really appreciate you. Everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. Wherever you're watching from, don't forget to check out my YouTube channel if you're not on it right now, Speechless with Kev Phares, or any of my other platforms, but definitely check out YouTube because I post most of my content there. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, always leave a comment even afterwards in the regular comment section, and ring that notification bell, push it to all, and share any of my videos with your friends. God bless you guys. God bless America. And until next time, this has been Speechless, Election 2024.